Rain hammered against the subway platform like the city itself wanted her dead. Mara Vale stumbled backward as Ethan's hands closed around her throat for the last time, except this time, he didn't stop. He shoved. Hard. She hit the tracks just as the train's headlights exploded through the tunnel. Death screamed toward her on steel wheels. Then a stranger in a black suit jumped down beside her, dragging her into darkness seconds before the train tore past. Pressed against his chest while metal shrieked inches away, Mara heard him whisper with terrifying certainty, "Nobody touches you again." That stranger was Lucien Moretti, the most dangerous man in New York, and he had just declared war on her behalf. If you want to see how far this story of survival and obsession goes, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. Let's see how far Mara's journey reaches across the world. The fluorescent lights in St. Catherine's emergency room flickered like dying stars. Mara Vale tied off the last stitch on a construction worker's gashed forearm while her hands trembled just enough that nobody else would notice. Nobody ever noticed. That was the problem. 3 years working trauma care in Manhattan's busiest ER, and she'd become invisible. Another exhausted nurse in blood-stained scrubs moving through the chaos like a ghost. Except ghosts didn't have ex-boyfriends who showed up unannounced. Mara. The voice came from behind the curtain dividing bed 7 from bed 8. Soft. Familiar. Wrong. She froze mid-motion, the sterile gauze pad suspended in her hand. Ethan Cross stepped through the gap in the curtains wearing his accountant uniform, pressed khakis, button-down Oxford, that apologetic smile that once made her feel protected instead of hunted. His brown hair was perfectly combed. His hands were clean. Everything about him screamed normal, except for the restraining order she'd filed 6 weeks ago. "You can't be here," Mara said quietly. Too quietly. Her voice always got smaller around him. "I just need 5 minutes." Ethan raised both palms in surrender. "Please, I know I messed up. I know I scared you, but we can fix this." The construction worker on the bed glanced between them, sensing something off. Mara forced herself to smile. Professional, calm. The mask she wore so well it had fused to her skin. "I'm working," she said. "You need to leave." "You always say that." Ethan's smile never wavered. "You always run away before we can actually talk." A scream erupted from the far end of the ER. Another trauma case rolling in. Another crisis demanding her attention. Mara grabbed the excuse like a lifeline. "Security will escort you out," she said, stepping past him toward the commotion. His hand caught her wrist. Not hard. Never hard enough to leave marks where people could see. "Don't walk away from me," Ethan whispered. The smile was still there. The eyes were not. Mara's pulse hammered against her ribs. The ER swirled around them, doctors shouting, monitors beeping, families crying, but all she felt was the pressure of his fingers and the way her body had learned to freeze instead of fight. Then Jerry from security appeared, his bulk filling the narrow corridor. "Miss Vale, you need me?" Ethan released her immediately, stepping back with that wounded expression he'd perfected. "I was just leaving, no problem here." He walked away slowly, hands in pockets, looking back once with eyes that promised this wasn't over. It never was. Mara's shift ended at 11. She changed out of her scrubs in the staff locker room, checking her phone compulsively. No new messages, no missed calls. Ethan had probably gone home. Probably. She'd thought that before. The last time, he'd waited 4 hours in his car outside her apartment. Dr. Patel stuck her head through the doorway. "You okay? Jerry told me what happened." "I'm fine." The lie came automatically. "That's the 3rd time this month he's shown up." Dr. Patel's expression was carefully neutral, the way doctors looked at patients they couldn't save. "The restraining order isn't working." "I know." "So what are you going to do?" Mara pulled her jacket on and avoided the question entirely. "I'll see you tomorrow." She left through the back entrance, the one the ambulances used. Rain had started falling while she worked, turning the city into a blurred watercolor of neon and shadow. The subway station at 42nd Street was 3 blocks away. Mara walked fast, head down, keys threaded between her knuckles like claws. Halfway there, she felt it. Someone following. She didn't look back. Looking back meant acknowledging the fear, and acknowledging the fear meant admitting Ethan had won. Instead, she walked faster, her sneakers splashing through puddles while her heart climbed into her throat. The subway entrance appeared ahead like salvation. Mara broke into a run. She hit the turnstile at full speed, swiping her card with shaking hands. The train platform stretched before her, half empty, fluorescent bright, smelling like rain and rust. An automated announcement crackled through the speakers. Next downtown train arriving in 3 minutes. She had 3 minutes. That's when she heard the footsteps behind her. Fast, purposeful, close. Mara spun around. Ethan stood 10 feet away, rain dripping from his hair onto the concrete platform. His smile was gone now. So was the mask. "You really thought a piece of paper would stop me?" His voice echoed off the tiled walls. "After everything we've been through?" "Ethan, please." Mara backed toward the edge of the platform, her pulse roaring in her ears. "Just leave me alone." "Leave you alone?" He laughed, sharp, broken. "You're mine, Mara. You don't get to just walk away. I'm not yours." The words came out stronger than she expected. "I never was." Something in his expression shifted. The desperation hardened into rage. "You ungrateful—" He lunged forward. Mara stumbled backward. Her heel caught the platform edge. For one breathless second, she teetered on the brink while Ethan's hands reached for her and the world tilted sideways. Then he shoved. Not to steady her, to finish it. Mara crashed onto the subway tracks in an explosion of pain. Her shoulder hit first, then her hip, the impact driving the air from her lungs. Gravel bit into her palms. The third rail hummed 6 inches from her leg, close enough to kill. Above her, Ethan stared down with an expression she'd never seen before. Relief. Like he'd finally solved a problem that had been plaguing him for years. Then he ran. Mara tried to stand. Her ankle screamed in protest, twisted, maybe broken. The platform towered above her, impossibly high. In the distance, a sound began building. Low, mechanical, growing. The train. Panic detonated in her chest. She scrambled toward the platform edge, clawing at concrete, but her injured ankle buckled beneath her weight. The train's headlights appeared in the tunnel like the eyes of something massive and merciless. 50 yards. 40. Her hands found the platform ledge but couldn't grip tight enough to pull herself up. 30 yards. The train's horn blasted through the station. A warning, a goodbye. 20 yards. Mara opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Then someone jumped onto the tracks beside her. A man. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with absolute certainty, despite the death bearing down on them. He grabbed Mara around the waist and dragged her sideways into a narrow maintenance alcove cut into the tunnel wall, a space barely wide enough for 2 bodies pressed together. The train hit the station at full speed. Steel shrieked past them, close enough that Mara felt the heat and wind tearing at her hair. The world became sound and fury and motion while she stood frozen against a stranger's chest, his arms locked around her like a cage keeping her from shattering. Then it was over. The train slowed, stopped. Passengers began filing onto the platform above, oblivious. The man holding her didn't move. Mara looked up at him for the first time. Dark hair slicked back with rain. Sharp cheekbones, eyes like black glass that reflected nothing. He wore a suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, now covered in tunnel grime and her blood. "You're safe," he said. His voice was quiet, controlled, terrifying in its complete lack of fear. "Who?" Mara's voice cracked. "Who are you?" The man studied her face with an intensity that made her feel exposed, like he could see through skin to the broken machinery beneath. "Lucien Moretti," he said finally. "And the man who pushed you is going to regret it for the rest of his very short life." Lucien didn't ask if she needed help getting out of the tunnel. He simply lifted her onto the platform like she weighed nothing, then hauled himself up with the casual strength of someone who'd done this before. Security was already converging on their position, radios crackling, but Lucien ignored them. "My car is waiting," he told Mara. "I don't—" She swayed, adrenaline crashing into shock. "I don't know you." "You know I just saved your life." His hand settled on the small of her back, steadying her. "That's enough for now." Mara should have argued, should have called the police, gone to the hospital, done any of the rational things a person does after nearly dying. Instead, she let Lucien guide her through the station toward the street exit, while her mind struggled to process what had just happened. Ethan pushed her, actually pushed her, onto the tracks. The realization hit harder than the fall. Outside, a black SUV idled at the curb with tinted windows and diplomatic plates. The driver, a mountain of a man in tactical gear, opened the rear door without a word. Lucien helped Mara inside, sliding in beside her. The interior smelled like leather and expensive cologne. "Where do you live?" Lucien asked. Mara's mouth moved, but no sound emerged. Her hands were shaking violently now, the shock settling into her bones. Lucien's expression didn't soften, but something shifted in his eyes, a recognition of trauma he'd seen before. He reached into a compartment and pulled out a bottle of water, cracking it open before handing it to her. "Drink," he said. Not a suggestion. She drank. The water helped, marginally. "My apartment," she managed. "I can't go there. He knows where I live." "The man who pushed you?" Mara nodded. "His name?" "Ethan Cross." The name tasted like poison. "My ex-boyfriend. There's a restraining order, but he won't stop. He's been following me for weeks." Lucien pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. "What does he do? Where does he work?" "He's an accountant, Marsh & Bauer, downtown." Mara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly freezing despite the car's heat. "Why does that matter?" "Because I'm going to make him stop." Lucien met her eyes with absolute certainty. Permanently. The way he said it sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the cold. "Who are you?" Mara whispered. For the first time, Lucien smiled. It wasn't comforting. "Someone who solves problems," he said. "And you, Mara Vale, have a very serious problem." The SUV pulled away from the curb, merging into Manhattan traffic. Through the window, Mara watched the subway station disappear behind them, the place where she should have died but didn't. Because a stranger had jumped onto the tracks after her. A stranger who looked at violence the way most people looked at weather. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere safe." Lucien's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression darkening. "Somewhere your ex-boyfriend will never find you." Mara wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could handle this herself. But the truth settled over her like a weight. She'd been trying to handle Ethan for 2 years. Restraining orders hadn't worked. Changing her number hadn't worked. Moving apartments hadn't worked. Maybe it was time to try something different. Even if that something wore a $10,000 suit and talked about making people stop the way other men talked about the weather. The SUV turned onto the West Side Highway, heading north. Behind them, the city blurred into light and shadow. And somewhere in that sprawling darkness, Ethan Cross was still out there, still hunting, still certain that Mara belonged to him. But now he had competition, and Lucien Moretti didn't lose. Bakeau. They drove for 20 minutes before pulling into an underground garage beneath a building Mara didn't recognize. The concrete tunnel wound downward through multiple security checkpoints, each one requiring facial recognition and encrypted cards, before finally emptying into a private parking level. "This is excessive," Mara said quietly. "This is necessary." Lucien opened her door. "Can you walk?" Her ankle throbbed but held weight. "I think so." He didn't look convinced, but didn't argue. They crossed the garage to a private elevator with brushed steel doors and no buttons. Lucien placed his palm on a sensor. The doors opened immediately. The ride up was silent except for the hum of machinery. Mara watched the floor numbers climb, 10, 20, 30, 40, before finally stopping at 47. The doors opened onto a hallway that looked more like a hotel than an apartment building. Dark hardwood floors, subtle lighting, original art on the walls. "Penthouse," Lucien explained, leading her to a door at the end of the corridor. Inside was a space that redefined Mara's understanding of wealth. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park. The furniture was minimal, but clearly custom. Everything was clean lines and muted colors, grays, blacks, whites, punctuated by occasional splashes of deep blue. It felt more like a museum than a home. "Guest room is through there." Lucien pointed to a hallway branching left. "Bathroom's en suite. There's clothes in the closet that should fit. I'll have my doctor come check your ankle." "Your doctor?" Mara limped toward the guest room doorway. "You have a doctor on call?" "I have a lot of things on call." She wanted to ask what that meant, but exhaustion was crashing over her now, adrenaline finally burning out. The guest room was smaller than the main space, but still larger than her entire apartment. The bed looked like it cost more than her car. "Why are you helping me?" The question came out before she could stop it. Lucien paused in the doorway. "Because I was there. Because someone needed to." That's not a real answer. His expression remained unreadable. "Get some rest, Mara. We'll talk in the morning." He left before she could press further, closing the door with a soft click. Mara stood alone in the unfamiliar room, her reflection staring back from a full-length mirror. She looked like someone who'd been hit by a train. Scrubs torn, hair matted with tunnel grime, blood smeared across her palms. But alive. Against all probability, alive. She peeled off her ruined clothes and stepped into the bathroom. The shower was one of those rainfall designs with water pressure that felt illegal. Mara stood under the spray until the water ran clear, washing away blood and dirt and the ghost feeling of Ethan's hands on her wrist. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a towel that was softer than anything she'd ever owned, someone had left fresh clothes on the bed. Black leggings, gray cashmere sweater. Both fit perfectly. A knock sounded at the door. "Come in," Mara called. A woman entered, late 50s, silver hair pulled back, carrying a medical bag. "I'm Dr. Chen. Mr. Moretti asked me to examine you." The examination was thorough but quick. Sprained ankle, not broken. Minor abrasions, mild shock, nothing that wouldn't heal. "You're lucky," Dr. Chen said, packing up her supplies. "Very lucky." "I know." The doctor left pain medication and strict instructions to rest. Then she was gone, leaving Mara alone again, with her thoughts and the growing realization that she'd just stepped into something much larger than a simple rescue. Nobody had doctors on call at midnight. Nobody lived in penthouses with facial recognition security. Nobody looked at attempted murder with the cold calculation she'd seen in Lucian's eyes. Her phone buzzed in her jacket pocket. The jacket she'd left on a chair. Mara retrieved it, her heart sinking when she saw the screen. 7 missed calls from Ethan, 12 text messages. She opened the most recent one with shaking hands. "I know you survived. We need to talk. This isn't over." Mara's blood turned to ice. He knew. Somehow Ethan already knew she'd made it out alive, which meant he was watching, waiting, planning his next move. She was about to text back, some futile attempt to reason with him, when her door opened without warning. Lucien stood there, holding 2 mugs of something that smelled like tea. "You should be resting," he said. "He's texting me." Mara held up the phone. "He knows I'm alive. He's not going to stop." Lucien crossed the room and took the phone from her hand. He scanned the messages with an expression that never changed, then slipped the device into his pocket. "Hey, E." "From this moment forward," Lucien interrupted quietly, "Ethan Cross does not get to contact you. He does not get to scare you. He does not get to exist in your life. You can't just, I can." He set the tea on the nightstand. "And I will." Mara stared at him. "I don't understand. Why do you care? You don't even know me." Lucien was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried something dark beneath the surface, something old and damaged. "Because I know what it's like," he said, "to be afraid of someone who's supposed to love you, to feel like there's no way out." His eyes met hers. "And I decided a long time ago that when I see someone drowning, I don't walk past." The vulnerability in those words hit Mara harder than anything that had happened tonight. "What happened to you?" she whispered. Lucian's expression shuttered closed. "Nothing you need to worry about. Drink your tea. Try to sleep." He was almost to the door when Mara spoke again. "Lucien?" He paused without turning. "Thank you," she said, "for jumping onto those tracks." His shoulders tensed. "Don't thank me yet. This isn't close to over." Then he was gone, leaving Mara alone with her tea and questions and the growing certainty that she'd just traded one dangerous man for another. The difference was, this one had saved her life. But at what cost? Bonds. Mara didn't sleep. She lay in the unfamiliar bed watching shadows move across the ceiling while her mind replayed the moment Ethan pushed her. Over and over. The shock in his eyes turning to relief. The way he'd run without looking back. He'd actually tried to kill her. The restraining order, the police reports, the careful documentation of every threat and violation. None of it had mattered. Ethan had escalated past control into something irreversible, and Lucien Moretti had appeared like some dark guardian pulled from a nightmare she didn't know she was having. Around 3 in the morning, Mara gave up on sleep. She crept into the main living area, expecting to find it empty. Instead, Lucien sat at the dining table with his laptop open and several phones arranged in a precise grid. He'd changed into dark jeans and a black Henley. Without the suit, he looked younger, more human. "Can't sleep?" he asked without looking up. "Can you?" "Not usually." He gestured to the kitchen. "There's food if you're hungry." Mara wasn't, but she needed something to do with her hands. The kitchen was pristine, stainless steel, marble counters, appliances that looked like they belonged in a spaceship. She found bread and made toast just to feel normal. "What do you do?" she asked, spreading butter mechanically. "For work, I mean." "I manage investments." The lie came smoothly, too smoothly. Investments. Real estate? Import, export? Various ventures. Mara bit into her toast, watching him. "You're lying." Lucien's fingers paused on the keyboard. "What makes you say that?" "Because people who manage investments don't have doctors on call at midnight. They don't live in fortresses. They don't look at stalkers like their grocery lists." A smile ghosted across his face. "You're observant." "I work in an ER. You learn to read people quickly." Lucien closed the laptop and gave her his full attention. "What do you think I do?" Mara considered. The security. The cars, the way his driver carried himself like military, the expensive everything, the complete lack of fear. "Something illegal," she said finally. "Something that requires violence." "Does that scare you?" "It should." She set the toast down. "But right now, I'm more scared of Ethan." "You won't be for long." The certainty in those words should have been comforting. Instead, they raised every warning flag Mara possessed. "What are you planning to do to him?" "Whatever's necessary." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer you're getting tonight." Lucien stood, moving to the windows. Manhattan sprawled below them, millions of lights fighting against the darkness. Ethan Cross works for Marsh & Bauer, mid-level accounting firm. Decent salary, but nothing spectacular. "How do you already know that?" "I told you, I manage investments. That includes information." He turned back to face her. "Your ex-boyfriend has been laundering money for the Kavanaugh Syndicate for the past 18 months, approximately $2 million moving through shell corporations every quarter." The room tilted sideways. "What?" Mara whispered. "The Kavanaughs are Irish organized crime, expanding through Hell's Kitchen, trying to move into legitimate businesses. They needed someone clean to handle their finances." Lucien's expression was clinical. Ethan was perfect. Respectable job. No criminal record. Easy to manipulate. Mara's mind raced. "You learned all this in 3 hours?" "I learned it in 20 minutes. The rest of the time I've been mapping his network." "Why?" "Because now you're not just an ex-girlfriend he's obsessed with." Lucien crossed back to the table, pulling up something on his laptop. "You're a witness to his criminal activity. Whether you know details or not doesn't matter. The Kavanaughs will assume you do." The toast turned to ashes in Mara's stomach. "You're saying they'll come after me too." "I'm saying they would have." He closed the laptop again. "But they won't get the chance." "Because you're going to stop them." "Yes." "Why?" The question burst out of her. "Why do you even care? This isn't your problem." Lucien looked at her with those black glass eyes that gave nothing away. "You really want to know?" "Yes." He was quiet for so long Mara thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, each word carefully chosen. "When I was 16, my mother tried to leave my father. He'd been beating her for years. Everyone knew. Nobody helped." His jaw tightened. "She made it as far as the front door before he shot her. I watched her bleed out on our kitchen floor while he called it an accident." The air left the room. "Lucien, I decided that day that I would never be powerless again." He met her eyes. "And that I would never watch someone else suffer what she suffered if I could stop it." Mara's throat closed. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be ready." "For what?" "For war." Lucien moved toward the hallway leading to the bedrooms. "Because that's what this becomes now. Ethan chose escalation. The Kavanaughs chose to protect him, and I choose to end them both." He paused in the doorway. Get some sleep, Mara. Tomorrow we start fighting back." Then he was gone, leaving her alone with the city lights and the terrifying realization that she'd just allied herself with someone far more dangerous than Ethan ever was. But maybe that was exactly what she needed. Someone willing to fight battles she couldn't win alone. Someone who looked at violence not as a last resort, but as a tool. Someone who would jump onto subway tracks without hesitation because saving her mattered more than safety. Mara returned to the guest room and finally fell into fitful sleep. When she woke 4 hours later, sunlight was streaming through windows she didn't remember opening, and Lucian Moretti was standing at her door holding coffee and a gun. "Time to learn how to protect yourself," he said simply. The war had begun. The gun was smaller than Mara expected, black polymer, compact. Lucien held it out to her like an offering, the coffee balanced in his other hand. "I don't want that," she said. "I don't care what you want." He set both items on the dresser. "I care about what you need, and you need to know how to defend yourself." Mara pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Morning light made the penthouse look different, less fortress, more prison. "I'm a nurse. I save lives. I don't, Ethan pushed you onto subway tracks." Lucian's voice was flat, clinical. "The Kavanaughs will be worse. This isn't negotiable." She wanted to argue, wanted to insist there were other ways, police, lawyers, witness protection. But the words died in her throat because she'd already tried those things, already filled out the reports and filed the orders and begged for help from people who nodded sympathetically before doing absolutely nothing. "Fine," she said, "but coffee first." Something that might have been approval flickered across Lucien's face. He handed her the mug, black coffee, no sugar, somehow exactly how she took it, and waited while she drank. The caffeine helped marginally. "How do you know how I take my coffee?" Mara asked. "I pay attention." "That's not comforting. It's not supposed to be." Lucian picked up the gun. "Get dressed. We're going downstairs." Downstairs turned out to be a private shooting range built into the building's sub-basement. Concrete walls, soundproofing, target silhouettes at varying distances. Mara followed Lucien through the reinforced door, feeling like she'd stepped into someone else's life. "Have you ever held a gun before?" he asked. "Once. My dad took me to a range when I was 16. I hated it." "You'll hate this too." Lucian checked the weapon with practiced efficiency. "But you'll learn anyway." The next 2 hours were brutal. Lucian was a patient teacher, but an exacting one. Stance, grip, sight alignment, breathing. He corrected every mistake with the same calm precision, standing behind her to adjust her arms, his hands firm on her shoulders when she flinched at the first shot. "Again," he said after she missed the target entirely. Mara fired. Missed. Again. Missed. "Your breathing's wrong. You're tensing before you pull the trigger." "I'm tensing because I'm holding a gun." "Then get comfortable with it." No sympathy, no coddling. Because when Ethan comes back, and he will, you won't have time to be scared. That straightened her spine faster than any pep talk. Mara raised the weapon, breathed, fired. The bullet punched through the target's shoulder. "Better," Lucian said. Again. By the time they finished, Mara's hands were shaking from adrenaline, and her ears were ringing despite the protection. But she'd hit center mass 6 times out of 20. Not good, but not helpless either. Lucien secured the weapons in a locked cabinet. "You'll practice every day." "I have a job," Mara protested. "You have a leave of absence." He held up a hand before she could explode. "I called the hospital this morning, explained you were in an accident. They granted you medical leave immediately." "You had no right." "I had every right. You're being hunted, Mara. Going to work makes you an easy target." She wanted to scream at him, wanted to rage about boundaries and control and all the ways he was making decisions without asking. But underneath the anger was something worse, relief. Because part of her had been terrified of going back to St. Catherine's and finding Ethan waiting in the parking garage. "I need clothes," she said instead. "My things." Already handled, Lucian gestured toward the elevator. "They're being delivered this afternoon along with everything else from your apartment." "You went through my apartment?" "I had someone inventory it. Nothing was removed without documentation." The casual efficiency of it made her stomach turn. "You're treating me like a prisoner." "I'm treating you like someone who almost died last night." Lucian stepped closer, his expression finally showing cracks. "You want independence?" Fine. Walk out that door. Go home. See how long you last before Ethan or the Kavanaughs find you. Maybe I'll take my chances. No, you won't. He said it with absolute certainty. Because you're smart enough to know this is survival, not surrender. Mara hated that he was right. Hated even more that she was starting to rely on him. They rode the elevator in tense silence. Back in the penthouse, Mara retreated to the guest room and tried calling her best friend, Sarah. It went straight to voicemail. So did her attempt to reach her supervisor at the hospital. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop trying to run. We both know how this ends. Ethan. Mara's hands started shaking again. She brought the phone to Lucien, who was working at the dining table surrounded by laptops and files. He read the message without reaction. He's using a burner, Lucien said. Probably bought it this morning. How is he not in jail? I told the police what happened. You told them your ex-boyfriend pushed you onto subway tracks. Without witnesses, it's your word against his. Lucien pulled up something on his screen. Ethan filed a missing persons report at 6 this morning, claimed you ran away after an argument, and he's worried about your mental state. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. That son of a... He's escalating exactly as predicted. Lucien made notes on a legal pad, which means we escalate faster. What does that mean? It means tonight we're meeting with someone who can make Ethan's life very difficult. Who? Lucien's smile was pure ice. Someone who owes me a favor. The someone turned out to be a woman named Diana Kozlov, who operated out of a private club in Tribeca that didn't have a name or a sign. Lucien's driver, a man called Marcus, who spoke exactly 3 words the entire trip, navigated through evening traffic while Mara tried not to think about what kind of favor required a secret nightclub. Diana handles information, Lucien. Lucien explained as they pulled up to an unmarked door. Financial records, communications, surveillance. If it exists digitally, she can find it. She's a hacker. She's an artist. Inside, the club was all dark wood and darker lighting. Jazz played softly through invisible speakers. The handful of patrons looked expensive and dangerous in equal measure. A hostess appeared immediately, leading them to a private booth in the back, where a woman sat reviewing multiple tablets simultaneously. Diana Kozlov was maybe 40, platinum blonde hair cut sharp as a blade, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Mara's car had when it was new. She glanced up as they approached, her expression transforming from annoyance to genuine pleasure. Lucienne Moretti. Her accent was Russian, softened by years in America. I heard you were dead. I heard that too. Lucienne slid into the booth. Rumors of my demise, etc. Diana's attention shifted to Mara. And who is this? Someone with a problem. Aren't we all? Diana gestured for them to sit. What kind of problem? Lucien laid out the situation with brutal efficiency. Ethan, the stalking, the attempted murder, the Kavanaugh connection. Diana listened without interrupting, her fingers moving across one of the tablets. Ethan Cross, she murmured. Marsh and Bauer. Yes, I see it. Sloppy work, really. The Kavanaughs should have used someone more experienced. Can you prove the money laundering? Lucien asked. Can I prove the sky is blue? Diana smirked. Give me 48 hours. I'll have enough evidence to bury him and half the syndicate. I need it faster. Of course you do. Diana's smile faded. This will cost you. Name your price. That shipment you intercepted last month, the one from Prague. Lucien's expression went very still. That shipment doesn't exist. Precisely why I want it. Diana leaned forward. I have a client who's very interested in what was on that manifest. The tension in the booth could have shattered glass. Fine, Lucien said finally. But I want Ethan Cross's entire digital life, bank records, communications, location data, everything. Done. Diana extended her hand. They shook like generals agreeing to a ceasefire. Your girl should stay out of sight until this is finished. The Kavanaughs don't play nice. I'm not his girl, Mara said sharply. Diana's eyebrows rose. My apologies. You're the woman he's protecting while looking at you like you're the only thing keeping him human. Totally different. Lucien stood abruptly. We're done here. Outside, Mara rounded on him. What shipment from Prague? Nothing you need to worry about. Stop saying that! Her voice echoed off the surrounding buildings. Stop deciding what I need to know. You want the truth? Lucian's control finally cracked. Fine. I run the largest import operation on the East Coast. Weapons, primarily. Sometimes other items that various governments prefer don't exist. That shipment from Prague contained enough artillery to start a small war. The world tilted sideways. You're an arms dealer. I'm a businessman who fills market demands. You're a criminal. Yes. No apology, no justification. I am. Mara should have walked away right then, should have run screaming to the nearest police station. Instead, she heard herself ask, "Why are you helping me?" Lucien looked at her for a long moment. Because I can. Because someone should. Because... He stopped, jaw clenching. Because what? Because when I look at you, I see my mother. His voice went rough. And I couldn't save her, but maybe I can save you. The honesty of it punched through every defense Mara had left. I don't need saving, she whispered. Everyone needs saving sometimes. Lucien stepped closer. The question is whether you're brave enough to accept help from someone like me. Someone like you? Someone broken. He said it simply, factually. Someone who has done terrible things and will do worse to protect what's mine. I'm not yours? Not yet. The words hung between them like a promise and a threat. Marcus cleared his throat from beside the SUV. Sir, we should go. The moment shattered. They drove back in silence while Mara's mind spun with revelations. Arms dealer, criminal, broken, and still the man who had jumped onto subway tracks to save her life. Back at the penthouse, Lucien disappeared into his office. Mara tried to sleep but couldn't. Instead, she found herself wandering the living room, studying the few personal items scattered among the expensive furniture. A photograph on a bookshelf caught her attention. Lucien, maybe 10 years younger, standing with an older man and a teenage boy. All three wore suits. None of them smiled. The older man had his hands on both their shoulders like a general inspecting troops. My father, Lucien said from behind her, and my younger brother Anton. Mara jumped. I didn't hear you. I know. He moved to stand beside her, studying the photograph with an expression she couldn't read. That was taken 6 months before my father died. How did he die? Someone shot him at a business meeting. Lucien's voice was flat. I shot them back. Mara set the photograph down carefully. Were you close? You and your father? He trained me to take over his empire. Close isn't the right word. Lucien turned away from the image. He was brutal, efficient. Everything in his life served a purpose, including his sons. That's awful. It's survival. He poured himself a drink from the bar cart. Whiskey, neat. My father built this organization from nothing. He taught me that sentiment is weakness, that love makes you vulnerable. Do you believe that? Lucien downed half the glass. I used to. And now? He looked at her, really looked at her. Now, I'm not sure. The air between them changed, charged. Mara knew she should step back, should retreat to her room and lock the door and remember that this man was dangerous in ways Ethan had never been. Instead, she moved closer. What changed? She asked quietly. You did. Lucien set the glass down. The second I saw you on those tracks, something shifted, like a switch I didn't know existed flipped on. That's not rational, safe, smart. His laugh was bitter. I know, but I stopped lying to myself around the same time I stopped believing I deserved anything good. Mara's chest ached. You saved my life. That doesn't make me good. Maybe not. She reached up, touching his face before she could stop herself. But it makes you better than you think you are. Lucien caught her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. You should be afraid of me. I should be afraid of a lot of things. Mara's voice came out breathless. Turns out I'm tired of fear. The kiss happened before either of them decided to do it. Lucien's mouth on hers was nothing like Ethan's calculating control. This was raw need and desperation, hands in her hair, her back against the bookshelf, two broken people finding each other in the dark. Then Lucien pulled away like she'd burned him. This can't happen, he said roughly. Why not? Because I will ruin you. He stepped back, putting space between them. Everything I touch turns to ash. I won't do that to you. That's my choice to make. No. Absolute. Final. It's mine, and I choose to keep you safe, even from me. He left the room before Mara could argue, disappearing into the hallway with his control back in place like armor. She stood alone among the expensive furniture and the photograph of dead men, her lips still burning from a kiss that shouldn't have happened but felt inevitable. That night, Mara barely slept. When she did, she dreamed of subway tracks and Lucien's hands and Ethan's face twisted with rage. She woke to her phone buzzing. Another unknown number. I can see you right now. Top floor, northwest corner. Wave, hello, Mara. Her blood turned to ice. She crossed to the windows, looking down at Central Park 47 stories below. In the darkness, she could barely make out individual people, but somewhere down there, Ethan was watching, hunting, waiting. Mara grabbed her phone and ran to Lucien's room. She didn't knock, just burst through the door. He was already awake, sitting on the edge of his bed with a gun disassembled on the nightstand. Shirtless, dangerous. He's watching the building, Mara said, shoving the phone at him. Lucien read the message, his expression going murderously calm. He made a call, speaking rapid-fire Italian to someone on the other end. Then another call. Then 3 more. Marcus is sweeping the perimeter, he told her. We'll find him. And then what? Then this ends. But Mara could see it in his eyes, the calculation, the violence waiting just beneath the surface. You're going to kill him, she whispered. Lucien didn't deny it. Would you stop me? The question hung between them. Would she? A month ago, the answer would have been immediate, obvious. Of course she would stop him. She was a nurse. She saved lives. But that was before Ethan pushed her onto subway tracks, before she felt her ankle twist and the third rail hum, inches from her leg and death scream toward her on steel wheels, before she understood that some people didn't stop unless you made them. I don't know, Mara admitted. Lucien nodded like she'd confirmed something he already suspected. Go back to bed. This will be handled. I can't just... You can. He stood, crossing to her. Because this is what I do, Mara. This is who I am, and you don't want to watch. Maybe I should. No. He cupped her face with both hands, his touch impossibly gentle for someone so dangerous. You keep the parts of yourself that are still good. Let me handle the rest. Mara wanted to argue, wanted to insist she wasn't fragile, but exhaustion and fear and the aftermath of their kiss all crashed over her at once. Don't kill him, she heard herself say. Lucien's expression didn't change. I'll do what's necessary. It wasn't a promise, it wasn't even close, but it was all she was going to get. Mara returned to her room and climbed back into bed, listening to Lucien move through the penthouse, making calls and issuing orders in multiple languages. The sounds of war being orchestrated. 20 minutes later, Marcus radioed back. Ethan was gone, but he'd left something behind. A black rose on the building's front steps with another message. You can't hide her forever. Morning came with Diana's phone call. Mara listened from the hallway as Lucien took the meeting in his office. Door cracked open. I have everything you asked for, Diana's voice filtered through the speaker. Ethan Cross has been laundering Kavanaugh money for 18 months. $2.4 million through 14 shell corporations. I can trace every transaction. Send it to me. Already done. But there's more. A pause. The Kavanaughs know about Mara. Lucien's voice went deadly quiet. Explain. Ethan contacted them yesterday. Told them his ex-girlfriend witnessed communications between him and their finance officer. They flagged her as a problem. How much of a problem? The kind they usually solve permanently. Diana's tone was apologetic. I'm sorry, Lucien, this just escalated. No, Lucien stood pacing. This just gave me exactly what I need, which is leverage. He ended the call and found Mara standing in the doorway. You heard, he said. Not a question. The Kavanaughs want me dead. They want the problem eliminated. You're just the problem. Lucien pulled up files on his laptop. But if I can prove Ethan's money laundering before they move, the FBI becomes their bigger concern. You're going to turn him into the police? I'm going to give Diana's evidence to a federal prosecutor I know, someone who's been trying to build a case against the Kavanaughs for years. His smile was sharp. Ethan becomes their star witness, or their fall guy. Either way, he's finished. It was elegant, ruthless, exactly what Mara should have expected. "What about me?" she asked quietly. "You disappear until this is over." Lucienne closed the laptop. "I have a property upstate, secure, isolated. Marcus will take you tonight." "Absolutely not. This isn't negotiable." "Yes, it is." Mara crossed the room, fury overriding fear. "I am not running away while you fight my battles. This stopped being just your battle when the Kavanaughs got involved. Then let me help." "Help how?" Lucian's controls started cracking. "You're a nurse, Mara, not a soldier, not a criminal. You don't belong in this world." "Neither did you once. I was born into it." He said it like a curse. "My father put a gun in my hand when I was 12. I've been killing since before I could drive. This is all I know." "Then teach me." "No." "Why not?" "Because I'm trying to save what's left of your soul." The words exploded out of him. "Because the second you cross certain lines, you can't come back. And I won't be responsible for destroying the best thing I've found in years." Mara stood frozen, his confession hanging between them. "You think I'm good," she said slowly. "I know you are." "I'm not." She laughed bitterly. "I stayed with Ethan for 2 years while he broke me down piece by piece. I made excuses for him, lied to my friends, convinced myself it was my fault. What part of that is good?" "The part where you survived." Lucian moved closer. "The part where you kept going to work and saving lives even when you could barely save yourself. That's not weakness. That's strength I've never had. You jumped onto subway tracks for a stranger. That's not strength. That's reflex." His voice dropped. "But you fought for yourself every single day, even when nobody else fought for you. That's courage I've never possessed." Mara's eyes burned. "I'm tired of being scared." "I know. I'm tired of running." "I know. And I'm tired of you making decisions for me like I'm something fragile that might break." Lucienne's expression shifted. "You're not fragile, you're terrifying." "Good." She stepped into his space, close enough to feel his heartbeat. "Then stop treating me like I need protection and start treating me like you're equal." "We are not equals." "You're right." Mara looked up at him. "I'm better than you. Because I haven't given up on being human yet." The words hit like a slap. For a moment, Lucian just stared at her. Then something in his expression broke open, not shattering but softening, like a wall developing cracks. "What do you want from me?" he asked roughly. "The truth. Always. No matter how ugly. The truth will hurt." "I'm already hurt." She touched his chest, feeling his heart hammering beneath her palm. "At least with truth I know what I'm dealing with." Lucian caught her hand, held it. "The truth is, I'm falling for you so hard it scares me more than any enemy I've ever faced." Mara's breath caught. "The truth is," he continued, "I want to keep you locked in this penthouse forever where nothing can touch you. But I know that makes me exactly like Ethan. It's not the same, isn't it?" His grip tightened. "Control is control. Protection becomes prison. I've watched it happen." "Then don't lock me up." Mara moved closer still. "Fight beside me instead." "You don't know what you're asking." "Yes, I do." She said it with absolute certainty. "I'm asking you to trust me the way I'm trusting you." Lucian studied her face like he was memorizing it. "If I do this, if I let you help, you follow my lead. No arguments, no hesitation. When I say run, you run. Deal. And if things go wrong..." He stopped, started again. "If something happens to me, Marcus gets you out, no matter what." "Nothing's going to happen to you. You can't promise that." "Neither can you." Mara rose on her toes, brushing her lips against his. "But we can promise to fight like hell to make sure we both survive." This kiss was different from the first. Slower, deeper. A pact sealed in wan and desperation. When they finally broke apart, Lucian rested his forehead against hers. "You're going to destroy me." "Good," Mara whispered. "We'll destroy each other and build something better from the wreckage." Sag. The plan came together over the next 12 hours. Diana sent over files that would bury Ethan and half the Kavanaugh organization. Lucien contacted his federal prosecutor, a woman named Angela Reeves, who apparently owed him several favors. And Marcus coordinated with Lucien's network to track Ethan's movements. Mara insisted on being part of every discussion. She watched as Lucien orchestrated war with phone calls and encrypted messages, saw the layers of his organization reveal themselves: soldiers, informants, politicians, judges, an entire shadow government operating beneath the legitimate world. "How long have you been doing this?" she asked during a brief break. "Since I was 21, when my father died." Lucien rubbed his eyes. "I inherited everything: the business, the territory, the enemies." "Did you want it?" "Want doesn't matter. Need does. And my family needed someone to hold the empire together." Mara thought about the photograph. The younger brother. "Where's Anton now?" Lucien's expression shuddered. "Dead. Killed in a power play 3 years ago." "I'm sorry." "Don't be." He knew the risks, but pain flickered beneath the words. "We all do." By midnight, everything was in place. Angela Reeves would receive Diana's evidence at dawn. Federal warrants would be issued by noon, and Ethan Cross would be arrested before sunset. The Kavanaughs would scramble to contain the damage, leaving Mara forgotten in the chaos. It was elegant, efficient, perfect. Except Ethan didn't wait. At 2 a.m, every device in the penthouse started blaring simultaneously. Security breach. Lucien was on his feet instantly, gun in hand. Marcus's voice crackled through the intercom. "Sir, we have a situation. Southeast stairwell, armed intruder, 3 hostiles." "Lock it down," Lucien ordered. "Already done. But there's more." A pause that made Mara's skin crawl. "They have explosives." The world stopped. Lucien's eyes met Mara's across the room. "Get to the safe room. Now." "What about you?" "I'm ending this." He moved toward the door. "All business. Marcus will protect you." "Lucien, no arguments, remember?" He stopped in the doorway. "You promised." Then he was gone, disappearing into the hallway with his gun and his ghosts. Marcus appeared, grabbing Mara's arm. "Ma'am, we need to move." "Where's the safe room?" "Behind the wine cellar." They ran through the penthouse, Mara's bare feet silent on hardwood floors. Behind them, gunfire erupted, sharp, close, terrifying. The wine cellar was hidden behind a bookshelf that swung open at Marcus's touch. Inside, stairs led down to a reinforced door with biometric locks. Marcus pressed his palm to the scanner. Nothing happened. He tried again. Still nothing. "Fuck," Marcus breathed. "Systems compromised." More gunfire. Closer now. A male voice shouted something in a language Mara didn't recognize. Then an explosion that shook the walls hard enough to knock paintings askew. Marcus shoved Mara behind him, weapon drawn. "Stay close." They retreated back through the wine cellar toward the main living area. Mara's heart hammered so hard she could barely hear anything else. All that shooting range practice, and her hands were empty, useless. They emerged into chaos. The penthouse's front entrance was a smoking ruin. 3 men in tactical gear moved through the wreckage with military precision, and leading them was someone Mara recognized even through the smoke. Ethan. Except this wasn't the polished accountant she'd known. This was something feral wearing his face, wild-eyed, sweating, desperate. He saw her and smiled. "There you are," he said. Marcus fired. The bullet caught one of the tactical guys in the shoulder, spinning him around. The other 2 returned fire immediately. Marcus grabbed Mara and hauled her behind the dining table as bullets tore through expensive furniture. "When I move," Marcus hissed, "you run for the bedroom. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but Mr. Moretti." "What about you?" "Doing my job." Then he was rolling out from cover, firing with brutal efficiency. Another hostile went down, but the third one circled around while Ethan hung back, watching. Always watching. Mara saw the third man's angle a second before Marcus did. "Left!" she screamed. Too late. The bullet hit Marcus in the chest, body armor absorbing most of the impact but still dropping him to one knee. The hostile advanced, weapon raised. Mara didn't think. She grabbed the gun from Marcus's belt and fired. The recoil nearly broke her wrist, but the bullet found its target, the hostile's leg. He went down screaming. Then Ethan was on her. He tackled Mara to the floor, knocking the gun away. His hands found her throat exactly like they had on the subway platform, squeezing, crushing. "You couldn't just die," Ethan snarled. "You had to make everything complicated." Mara clawed at his face, bucked her hips, did everything Lucian had taught her that morning. But Ethan was stronger, heavier, fueled by whatever chemicals he'd taken to work up the courage for this assault. Black spots danced across her vision. Then Ethan's weight disappeared. Lucian had him by the throat, slamming him against the wall hard enough to crack plaster. Blood ran down Lucian's face from a gash above his eyebrow, and his suit was torn, but his eyes were clear and mercilessly focused. "You made a mistake," Lucian said quietly. Ethan laughed, broken, hysterical. "I made lots of mistakes. Which one?" "Thinking you'd leave here alive." Lucian's hand tightened. Mara watched Ethan's face turn purple, watched him claw uselessly at Lucian's grip, watched the life start to drain from his eyes. And she realized with terrible clarity that Lucian was actually going to do it, was going to kill Ethan right here, right now, while she watched. Part of her wanted to let him. The part that still felt Ethan's hands on her throat. The part that remembered 2 years of systematic destruction disguised as love. The part that had spent weeks looking over her shoulder waiting for him to appear. That part wanted Ethan dead. But another part, the part that was still Mara Vale, trauma nurse, someone who saved lives even when it cost her everything, couldn't let it happen. "Lucien," she whispered. "Don't." His grip didn't loosen. "Please." Lucien's eyes found hers across the wreckage. Something passed between them, understanding maybe, or disappointment. Then he dropped Ethan. Ethan collapsed, gasping, alive. "You're right," Lucian said to Mara. "I'm not like him." Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Lucian pulled out his phone, making a call. "Angela, it's time. Everything we discussed. Yes, all of it." He ended the call and looked at Ethan. "Federal prosecutors are receiving evidence of your money laundering operation as we speak. The Kavanaughs will disavow you to save themselves, and you're going to prison for a very long time." Ethan's face went slack with horror. "Unless," Lucian continued, "you cooperate. Give them everything. Names, accounts, operations. Maybe you serve 5 years instead of 20. "They'll kill me." "Probably," Lucian smiled without humor. "But that's not my problem anymore." Police burst through the ruined doorway. Angela Reeves leading them with federal badges and guns drawn. "Ethan Cross," she said formally, "you're under arrest for attempted murder, stalking, money laundering, and about 16 other charges I'm still tallying up." Ethan was cuffed and read his rights while Mara sat on the floor, her throat bruised and aching, watching the man who had haunted her for years finally get dragged away. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like the end of one war and the beginning of another. Because across the destroyed penthouse, Lucien was already on another call, already moving pieces, already fighting the next battle. And Mara realized with absolute certainty that this was her life now. Running beside someone who fought wars before breakfast, loving someone who had killed people and would kill again, choosing protection wrapped in violence over safety wrapped in ignorance. Lucien ended his call and crossed to her, offering his hand. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Mara took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. "I shot someone." "I know." "I saved Marcus." "I know." "I'm not who I was yesterday." Lucien cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing the bruises forming on her throat. "No, you're stronger." Mara leaned into his touch. "What happens now?" "Now?" Lucien kissed her forehead. "Now we deal with the Kavanaughs, because Ethan might be finished, but they're just getting started." And as federal agents swarmed the penthouse and paramedics treated Marcus, and evidence was collected from the crime scene that her life had become, Mara understood something fundamental had shifted. She'd crossed a line tonight, fired a weapon at a living person, chosen violence over passivity, become exactly the kind of person Lucien had warned her she'd become. But she was alive, and Ethan was in handcuffs. And for the first time in years, Mara Vale felt something other than fear. She felt dangerous. Outside, dawn was breaking over Manhattan. A new day. A new war. And Mara was ready to fight. The safe house upstate looked nothing like safety. Mara stood at the window watching rain hammer against bulletproof glass while her reflection stared back like an accusation. 3 days since federal agents had dragged Ethan away in handcuffs. 3 days since she'd shot a man and watched Lucian nearly kill another. 3 days since her old life had finished dying and this new blood-soaked version had fully taken its place. Behind her, Marcus limped through the living room checking security feeds on a tablet. The bullet had cracked 2 ribs beneath his vest, but he'd refused medical leave. Refused to leave Mara unprotected while Lucian waged war against the Kavanaughs back in Manhattan. "Anything?" she asked without turning. "Quiet." Marcus's voice was rough from painkillers. Too quiet. That was the problem. Angela Reeves had arrested Ethan along with 4 mid-level Kavanaugh operatives. The evidence Diana provided had been ironclad, enough to freeze accounts, trigger warrants, send the entire syndicate scrambling. Should have been chaos. Panic. The Kavanaughs should have been too busy protecting themselves to worry about one trauma nurse who'd gotten caught in their machinery. Instead, silence. No retaliation, no threats, nothing. Lucian called every 12 hours like clockwork, but the conversations were brief, encrypted, carefully empty of details. He was handling it. She should rest. Everything was under control. Mara didn't believe him. She could hear the exhaustion beneath his words, the way he paused before answering simple questions, the background sounds of Manhattan that told her he wasn't sleeping, wasn't eating, wasn't doing anything except fighting a war he refused to let her see. "I should be there," Mara said. Marcus didn't look up from the tablet. "Mr. Moretti was very clear about your location. Mr. Moretti isn't my keeper." "No, ma'am. He's the man keeping you alive." Mara turned from the window. "What's really happening, Marcus? And don't give me the sanitized version." Marcus set the tablet down slowly. His face was hard to read, all sharp angles and old scars. But something in his eyes looked almost sympathetic. "The Kavanaughs went quiet because they're planning something big," he said finally. "Mr. Moretti knows it. That's why he wants you buried deep until it's over." "What kind of something?" "The kind that burns everything down to send a message." Before Mara could press further, Marcus's phone buzzed. He answered immediately, his expression shifting from neutral to alarmed in half a heartbeat. "When?" A pause. "How many?" Another pause, longer this time. "Understood." He ended the call and started moving, pulling weapons from hidden caches with practiced efficiency. "What's happening?" Mara demanded. "Kavanaugh's soldiers just hit 3 of Mr. Moretti's warehouses simultaneously. Coordinated strike." "Is Lucien—" "He's fine. Already responding." Marcus handed her a handgun. "But if they're making that kind of move, they might try for you next. We're relocating." "To where?" "Somewhere they'll never find you." Mara checked the weapon automatically, muscle memory from hours of practice with Lucian. "I'm not running anymore." "You're not running. You're being strategic." Marcus grabbed his go bag. "There's a difference." They were halfway to the garage when every light in the house died simultaneously. Marcus froze. "That's not the generator." "What is it?" "A trap." He spun toward the back entrance just as the windows exploded inward in a shower of glass and smoke grenades. Mara hit the floor on instinct, covering her head while the world dissolved into chaos and chemical fog. Gunfire erupted. Sharp. Close. Too close. Marcus returned fire toward shapes moving through the smoke, but the attackers had numbers and position. Mara crawled toward the kitchen, trying to find cover, but hands grabbed her from behind. She twisted, bringing her weapon up, but a knee caught her wrist with brutal precision. The gun clattered away. Someone zip-tied her hands before she could scream. Then a bag went over her head, and the world went dark. When the hood came off, Mara was sitting in a metal chair inside what looked like an industrial freezer. Frost covered the walls. Her breath misted in the air, and across from her sat a woman in an expensive coat who looked at Mara the way scientists looked at specimens. "Mara Vale," the woman said. Her accent was Irish, softened by years away from home. The nurse who accidentally wandered into a war. "Where's Marcus?" "Your bodyguard is alive. Injured, but alive. We're not monsters." The woman smiled. "My name is Siobhan Kavanaugh, and we need to have a conversation about Lucien Moretti." Mara's blood turned colder than the air. "I don't know anything." "That's a lie, but an understandable one." Siobhan crossed her legs. Let me be direct. Your ex-boyfriend was laundering our money. Badly. We were going to cut ties anyway. His arrest merely accelerated our timeline. Then why am I here? Because Lucien Moretti has been systematically destroying our operation for 3 weeks. Warehouses burned, shipments intercepted. Politicians who used to take our calls suddenly developing consciences. Siobhan's smile never wavered. He's costing us approximately $4 million per day, and it all started the night he pulled you off those subway tracks. Understanding crashed over Mara like ice water. You think I'm leverage. I know you are. Siobhan pulled out a phone, showing Mara a photograph. Lucien leaving his building. Lucien getting into his SUV. Lucien looking exhausted and dangerous and utterly focused. He's been running himself into the ground protecting you. A man like that doesn't do that for just anyone. You're wrong. Am I? Siobhan zoomed in on another photo. This one showed Lucien standing at a window, staring out at the city. And reflected in the glass behind him was Mara's face, a photograph on his desk where he could see it constantly. He's in love with you, desperately. The kind of love that makes smart men do catastrophically stupid things. Mara's chest tightened. She'd seen that photograph before. Lucien must have taken it during one of their training sessions, catching her mid-laugh at something Marcus had said. She'd been so focused on learning to protect herself she hadn't noticed him documenting the moments between. What do you want? Mara asked quietly. I want Lucien Moretti to stop waging war against my family. Siobhan leaned forward. And you're going to convince him. He won't negotiate. He will if the alternative is watching you die. Siobhan's expression didn't change. We're going to make a video. You're going to tell Lucien to stand down, withdraw from our territory, forget this vendetta. In exchange, we let you go unharmed. And if I refuse, then we send him pieces of you until he complies. Still said with that same pleasant smile, starting with fingers and escalating from there. Nausea rolled through Mara's stomach. You're bluffing, am I? Siobhan nodded to someone behind Mara. Hands grabbed her left wrist, forcing her palm flat on the metal arm of the chair. Someone else produced bolt cutters. Industrial. Massive. The kind used to cut through chain-link fences. Or bones. Wait! Mara's voice cracked. Wait, I'll do it! I'll make your video! Siobhan raised a hand. The bolt cutters paused. Smart girl. But just so we're clear about consequences, the blades closed around Mara's pinky finger. Not cutting through. Just applying pressure. Enough to make the bone creak. Enough to imagine exactly how much worse it could get. Do we understand each other? Siobhan asked. Mara couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the pain building in her hand and the absolute certainty that this woman would follow through without hesitation. Yes, she gasped. The pressure released. Siobhan stood, brushing frost off her coat. Excellent. We'll film in 10 minutes. Say exactly what I tell you to say. Cry if you need to. It adds authenticity. But if you try to warn him or send any kind of coded message, we start removing parts. She left the freezer. Mara sat alone with her terror and the 2 silent men who'd stayed behind to guard her. Her wrist throbbed where they'd gripped it. Her hands were still zip-tied. And somewhere in Manhattan, Lucien was fighting a war that had just changed shape entirely. Because Siobhan was right about one thing. Lucien would trade anything to keep Mara safe. Even his empire. Even his life. And Mara couldn't let that happen. The video setup was professional. Ring light, high-definition camera, a blank wall behind Mara that could have been anywhere. Siobhan directed the shoot personally, adjusting Mara's position until the bruises on her wrists were visible, but not obviously from restraints. Remember, Siobhan said, short and direct. You're scared, but holding it together. You want him to save you, so he needs to do exactly what we say. Mara nodded, her mind racing. There had to be a way to warn Lucien without getting herself mutilated. Some phrase or gesture he'd recognize as wrong. But Siobhan was watching her like a hawk, and the bolt cutters sat on a table just within view. The camera started recording. Lucien, Mara began, and her voice cracked genuinely. I'm okay. I'm not hurt. But I need you to listen very carefully. She followed Siobhan's script, explained the terms. Stand down. Withdraw. Let the Kavanaughs rebuild without interference. In exchange, Mara would be released unharmed within 24 hours. The whole time she spoke, she kept her hands in frame, kept them visible. Because Lucien had taught her that when words failed, action spoke. And Mara was betting everything that he'd taught her well enough to understand. "Cut," Siobhan said. "Perfect. We'll send this within the hour." Mara was dragged back to the freezer and left alone again. She had maybe 60 minutes before Lucien received the video. 60 minutes to figure out how to escape, or at least leave some trail he could follow. The zip ties were tight, but not impossible. Mara worked her wrists back and forth, ignoring the burning as plastic bit into skin. If she could dislocate her thumb, she might be able to slip free. She'd seen it done during combat medical training. Never thought she'd have to do it herself. She was halfway to hyperventilating through the pain when the freezer door opened. Not Siobhan this time. A man Mara had never seen before stepped inside. Older, gray hair, expensive suit. He looked at her with an expression that was almost apologetic. "Miss Vale," he said. "My name is Connor Kavanagh. Siobhan is my daughter." Mara said nothing. Connor pulled up a second metal chair and sat. "I want you to know this isn't personal." "Kidnapping is pretty personal." "Fair point," he sighed. "I've been in this business 40 years, started with nothing, built an empire. And now men like Lucien Moretti think they can tear it all down because we made the mistake of using an accountant who couldn't keep his personal life separate from business. Ethan tried to kill me. I know, and that was unfortunate." Connor's voice remained mild. "But it created this situation. Lucien declared war. We have to respond. If we don't, every rival from here to Boston will think we're weak." "So you're going to torture me to prove you're strong?" "I'm going to use you to end a conflict before it costs more lives." He leaned forward. "Do you know how many people have died in the past 3 weeks because of this war? 17. Good men and women with families, all because Lucien Moretti fell in love with the wrong person at the wrong time." Guilt twisted in Mara's chest despite herself. "That's not my fault." "No, but it is your reality." Connor stood. "If Lucien surrenders, you go home. If he doesn't, things get very ugly very quickly. And I genuinely hope it doesn't come to that." He left before Mara could respond. She sat alone in the freezing cold, working her wrists raw against the zip ties, and tried not to think about 17 dead people who'd gotten caught in machinery they probably didn't even understand. Tried not to think about how many more would die if this continued. Tried not to think about Lucien's face when he received that video and realized she was gone. The thumb dislocated with a pop that made her vision white out. But the zip tie slipped free. Mara bit back a scream, cradling her ruined hand against her chest. Relocating the joint would have to wait. Right now she needed to move before someone checked on her. The freezer door wasn't locked from the inside. They hadn't expected her to get free. Mara eased it open, listening. Voices echoed from somewhere deeper in the warehouse. At least 3 people, maybe more. She crept into a hallway lined with industrial shelving, boxes everywhere, loading equipment. This was a legitimate business on paper, probably. The Kavanaghs laundering their empire through honest-looking logistics. Mara moved toward what looked like an exit sign, her bare feet silent on concrete. Every few steps she had to stop and breathe through waves of pain from her dislocated thumb. But she kept moving, almost to the door, almost free. Then someone grabbed her from behind. Mara twisted, bringing her elbow back hard into whoever held her, connected with ribs. Heard a grunt, but the grip didn't release. "Stop fighting," a male voice hissed. "I'm trying to help you." Mara froze. The man spun her around. It was one of the guards from the freezer. Young, maybe 25. He looked terrified. "My name is Ryan," he whispered urgently. "I'm undercover FBI. Angela Reeves sent me to find you." Hope and suspicion warred in Mara's chest. "Prove it." Ryan pulled a badge from inside his jacket. It looked real. But Mara had learned not to trust anything at face value. "Angela knows about the safe house attack," Ryan continued in a rush. "She's been tracking Kavanagh movements for weeks. She has agents positioned around this warehouse, but she needs confirmation you're inside before she can move." "Why not just raid the place?" "Because Connor Kavanagh has a federal judge in his pocket who'll throw out any evidence obtained without perfect probable cause. We need you to be seen leaving voluntarily or the whole case collapses." Mara's mind raced. It made sense. Too much sense. or exactly enough sense to be a convincing lie. How do I know you're telling the truth? Ryan's expression was desperate. You don't. But if I'm lying, you're already fucked. If I'm telling the truth, this is your only chance. Fair point. What do you need me to do? Mara asked. Get to the loading dock, south side of the building. There's a small window about 15 feet up. Can you climb? Mara looked at her dislocated thumb. Probably not. Then I'll boost you, but we have to move now before they realize you're gone. They ran. Ryan led her through a maze of corridors, moving with the confidence of someone who'd memorized the layout. Mara's lungs burned, her hand screamed, but she kept pace. The loading dock appeared ahead, massive bay doors, one slightly open, and standing in that gap was Siobhan Kavanaugh. She smiled when she saw them. Ryan, she said pleasantly. I'm disappointed. Ryan's face went pale. Siobhan, did you really think we didn't know? She stepped into the warehouse, followed by 4 armed men. Angela Reeves has been trying to plant people in our organization for 2 years. You've lasted longer than most. Understanding crashed over Mara. Ryan wasn't undercover. Or he was, but they'd found out, which meant this was a trap. Run, Ryan said quietly. Then he charged at Siobhan's men. He made it 3 steps before they shot him. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Ryan went down hard, blood spreading across the concrete. Mara stood frozen in horror. Siobhan shook her head sadly. Such a waste. He was good at his job, too. She gestured, and 2 men grabbed Mara, dragging her away from Ryan's body. You've been very resourceful, Siobhan said, falling into step beside them, dislocating your own thumb. Impressive pain tolerance. But here's what you need to understand, Miss Vale. There is no escape. There is no rescue. There's only Lucian's compliance or your suffering. They threw Mara back into the freezer. This time they didn't use zip ties. They chained her to a radiator bolted to the wall. We sent your video 30 minutes ago, Siobhan said. Lucien has 12 hours to respond. If he agrees to our terms, you go home. If he doesn't, we start the next video, and that one will be much less pleasant. She closed the freezer door. Mara sat alone in the dark and cold, her thumb throbbing, Ryan's blood still wet on her feet, and tried not to think about what 12 hours could become. Hours passed like years. Mara relocated her thumb herself, biting through her shirt to muffle the scream. The pain was blinding, but necessary. She couldn't fight or run with a useless hand. Not that fighting or running seemed possible anymore. The chain had maybe 6 feet of slack, enough to reach the door but not open it, enough to pace but not escape. The radiator was old cast iron, built into the wall like it had been there since the building was constructed. Immovable. Mara was working on the chain itself, looking for weak links, testing each connection, when the door opened again. Connor Kavanaugh stepped inside, carrying a folding chair and a tablet. It's been 11 hours, he said, setting up the chair. I thought you'd want to see Lucien's response. He turned the tablet around. The video showed Lucien sitting in what looked like his penthouse office. He looked worse than Mara had ever seen him, unshaven, exhausted, eyes rimmed red from lack of sleep or something darker. I received your terms, Lucien said to the camera. His voice was flat, dead. And my answer is no. Mara's heart stopped. You took something that doesn't belong to you, Lucien continued. And you made the mistake of thinking I value my empire more than I value her. You're wrong. Connor's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. On the tablet, Lucien leaned forward. So, here's my counteroffer. You have 24 hours to return Mara Vale unharmed. If you do, I'll consider letting your organization continue existing. If you don't, I will burn everything you've ever built to ashes and scatter your family across 3 continents. He paused. And unlike you, I don't bluff. The video ended. Connor set the tablet down carefully. Your boyfriend just declared absolute war. He's not my boyfriend. No? Connor's smile was cold. Then what is he? Mara didn't have an answer. Connor stood, picking up his chair. Siobhan wanted to start cutting pieces off you immediately. I convinced her to wait, to give Lucien time to reconsider. But after that response, he shook his head. I can't protect you anymore. I never asked you to. No, but I was trying anyway. He moved toward the door. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. You seem like a decent person who got caught in something you never deserved. Then let me go. I can't, because if I do, everything my family built collapses, and I won't allow that. Connor paused in the doorway. Lucien Moretti would make the same choice if your positions were reversed. You know that, don't you? The door closed before Mara could respond, but the answer sat heavy in her chest. Yes. Lucien would absolutely sacrifice her to protect what was his, except he'd just done the opposite, chosen her over his empire, declared war he couldn't possibly win against an organization that had been entrenched in New York for decades, signed both their death warrants rather than surrender. And somehow, that was both the most terrifying and most beautiful thing anyone had ever done for her. Mara was still processing when the door opened again. Siobhan entered with two men carrying cameras. New video time, she said pleasantly, and this one's going to be memorable. They set up faster than before. Professional. Efficient. Like they'd done this before. Mara was unchained from the radiator and zip-tied to the metal chair again, the cameras positioned, the lights arranged. Siobhan held up the bolt cutters. Last chance to convince Lucien to be reasonable, she said. He won't change his mind. Then you're going to suffer for his pride. Siobhan tested the bolt cutters, metal blades snapping together with a sound like bones breaking. We'll start with the pinky finger on your right hand, work our way through each digit. By the time we're done, maybe Lucien will have developed some perspective. Mara's heart hammered against her ribs. This was really happening. They were actually going to do this. Wait, she heard herself say. Siobhan paused. Yes? What if I could give you something better than Lucien's surrender? Interest flickered across Siobhan's face. I'm listening. Mara's mind raced, trying to build a lie convincing enough to buy time. Lucien has a weapons cache, the one from Prague that Diana Kozlov wanted. If I tell you where it is, you could sell the location to his enemies, make millions, destroy his reputation. It was thin, desperate, but Siobhan's expression shifted into something calculating. Where? She asked. I'll take you there, but you have to let me go after. Siobhan laughed. You think I'm stupid enough to believe you'd betray Lucien? I think I'm smart enough to value my fingers more than his pride. Mara met her eyes. He chose war over my safety. Why should I protect him? For a moment, Siobhan considered it. Then she shook her head. Nice try, but we're staying on schedule. She nodded to one of the men. He grabbed Mara's hand, forcing it flat on the chair arm. Siobhan positioned the bolt cutters around Mara's pinky finger. The cameras started recording. Any last words for Lucien? Siobhan asked. Mara looked directly at the camera, at the man who'd jumped onto subway tracks for her, who'd taught her to shoot and fight and survive, who'd chosen her over everything. I love you, she said, and this isn't your fault. Then she closed her eyes. The blade started to descend, and the warehouse exploded. Not figuratively, actually exploded. The concussion wave knocked everyone sideways. Mara's chair toppled, slamming her shoulder into concrete. The lights shattered. Alarm shrieked, and through the chaos came gunfire. Heavy, professional, military grade. Mara rolled, trying to get her bearings. The zip ties had snapped when she fell. Her hands were free. Through the smoke and darkness, she could see shapes moving. Kavanaugh soldiers running toward the firefight. Then someone was cutting through the smoke toward her. Marcus, covered in blood and moving like every step cost him, but alive. Can you walk? He shouted over the chaos. Yes! He hauled her up and they ran. The warehouse was a war zone. Lucien's people had come in force, dozens of them, attacking from multiple angles with the kind of precision that came from serious training. This wasn't a rescue. It was an invasion. Marcus got Mara to the loading dock and shoved her into a waiting SUV. The driver took off before the door even closed, tires screaming. Where's Lucien? Mara gasped. Marcus's expression went dark. Still inside. He's ending this personally. We have to go back. No! Marcus grabbed her shoulder. We follow orders. He gets you safe. That's the mission. I don't care about the mission. But the SUV was already blocks away. Sirens wailing in the distance as every cop in the precinct responded to reports of a literal war breaking out in industrial Queens. Mara twisted in her seat, watching the warehouse recede into the distance. Smoke poured from shattered windows. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness like lightning. And somewhere in that hell, Lucian Moretti was fighting a battle he might not survive, because he'd chosen her. Because he'd declared war rather than let them hurt her. Because love had finally made him as stupid as Connor Cavanaugh predicted. The SUV merged onto the highway heading back toward Manhattan. Behind them, the warehouse burned. And Mara realized with absolute clarity that nothing would ever be the same again. The woman who'd worked as a trauma nurse and believed in saving lives was gone. In her place sat someone new, someone who'd watched a man die trying to save her, someone who'd nearly lost fingers to prove a point, someone who'd looked into cameras and confessed love while waiting for pain, someone willing to burn the whole world down if it meant keeping Lucian Moretti alive. The SUV's phone rang. Marcus answered on speaker. Status? Lucian's voice, rough with smoke and exertion. Package secured, en route to secondary location. Good. A pause filled with gunfire. Tell Mara I'm sorry. Tell me yourself, Mara shouted toward the phone. Can't. Little busy. More gunfire. But I need you to know something. What? I meant what I said. Empire or you. I choose you. Always. Then the line went dead. Mara sat in the back of the SUV, her dislocated, then relocated thumb throbbing, Ryan's blood still on her skin, and tried to breathe through the realization that she'd become exactly what Lucian had warned her about. Someone willing to do terrible things. Someone choosing violence over peace. Someone who'd just fallen completely, irrevocably in love with the most dangerous man in New York. And there was no going back from that. The SUV disappeared into Manhattan traffic. Behind them, the war raged on. And somewhere in the smoke and chaos, Lucian Moretti fought for both their futures with everything he had. Whether it would be enough remained to be seen. The secondary location was a brownstone in Brooklyn that looked like every other building on the block. Marcus hustled Mara inside through a reinforced door while two armed guards swept the perimeter. The interior was sparse. Safe house furniture, backup weapons, medical supplies stacked in careful rows. Sit, Marcus ordered, pointing to a chair. Mara's legs gave out before she could argue. Adrenaline was crashing hard, leaving her shaking and nauseous. Marcus grabbed a first aid kit and started examining her hands with surprising gentleness for someone built like a tank. Your thumb's already swelling, he said. You relocated it yourself? Didn't have much choice. Brave. Stupid. Both. He wrapped it carefully, his movements practiced. You'll need x-rays, but it should heal. Through the window, Manhattan glittered in the distance. Somewhere in that sprawl of light and concrete, Lucian was still fighting, still bleeding, still choosing her over survival. Mara's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, then muscle memory took over. Hello? Miss Vale? Siobhan Cavanaugh's voice was perfectly composed despite whatever hell she'd just escaped. That was quite the dramatic rescue. Mara's blood went cold. How did you get this number? I get everything eventually. A pause filled with implications. Is Lucien there? I'd like to speak with him. Go to hell. Already there, darling. Lucien's ensuring that personally. Siobhan's tone shifted, losing its polish. He just killed my father. The words hit like a physical blow. What? Connor Cavanaugh is dead. Shot 3 times in the chest while trying to negotiate a ceasefire. Siobhan's voice was ice over rage. So now this stops being business. Now it's personal. The line went dead. Mara looked at Marcus. Connor's dead. Lucien killed him. Marcus's expression didn't change. Good. Good? He just murdered someone. He eliminated a threat. Marcus finished bandaging her hand. Connor Cavanaugh was responsible for 17 murders we know about and probably 50 more we don't. The world's better off. That's not... Mara stopped, the argument dying in her throat, because she couldn't finish that sentence honestly. Connor had ordered her torture, had watched his daughter threaten to mutilate her, had built an empire on violence and called it business. Maybe the world was better off. Maybe Lucien had done exactly what needed doing, And maybe that made her just as broken as he was. The Brownstones' phone rang. Marcus answered, listened, then handed it to Mara. Lucien's voice came through rough and exhausted. Are you hurt? My thumb. Nothing serious. Mara gripped the phone tight enough to hurt. Connor's dead. I know. Siobhan called me. She said you shot him during a ceasefire. He was reaching for a weapon. No apology, no justification, just fact. It was him or me. She's going to retaliate. Let her try. Lucien coughed, the sound wet. I'm sending additional security to your location. Stay there until I arrive. Where are you now? Cleaning up? Another cough. I'll be there in 2 hours. Lucien, I love you. He said it simply, factually. Everything I'm doing is to keep you alive. Remember that. Then he was gone. Mara sat holding a dead phone while her mind spun through implications. Connor Cavanaugh dead meant the syndicate would fracture or consolidate. Either way, Siobhan would come for blood. And Lucien was wounded. She'd heard it in his breathing, in the pauses between words. How bad is he hurt? She asked Marcus. Bad enough that he should be in a hospital. Marcus checked his weapon methodically. But he won't go until this is finished. Define finished. Siobhan Cavanaugh dead or surrendered. The syndicate broken beyond repair. You safe enough to live a normal life again. Marcus looked at her. That's what finished means to him. Nothing less. Mara stood, pacing the small room. Her thumb throbbed. Her wrists ached where the zip ties had cut. And somewhere in her chest, love and horror were fighting for dominance. She'd told Lucien she loved him on camera while waiting to be mutilated. He'd declared war rather than let them hurt her. Now a man was dead, and more would follow. All because Ethan Cross had pushed her onto subway tracks, and Lucien Moretti had jumped down after her. This is insane, Mara whispered. Yes, Marcus agreed, but it's also survival. And in this world, those are the same thing. Lucien arrived 90 minutes later looking like he'd been through a war. Because he had. Blood soaked through his shirt on the left side. His knuckles were split. A gash above his eyebrow had been hastily stitched with the kind of battlefield medicine that left scars. But his eyes were clear and absolutely focused when he walked through the door. Mara was across the room and in his arms before she could think. You're hurt, she said against his chest. I'm alive. His arms came around her carefully like she might shatter. That's all that matters. Marcus appeared with medical supplies. Sir, you need proper treatment. Later, Lucien guided Mara to the couch, sitting heavily. First we talk. About what? About what happens next. He looked at her with an expression that was almost vulnerable. The Cavanaughs are finished as an organization. Connor's death fractured their leadership. Half their soldiers are already running. The other half are negotiating surrender terms. And Siobhan? Siobhan has 17 loyal men and enough rage to be extremely dangerous. Lucien grimaced as Marcus started cleaning the wound on his side. She'll come after both of us. Probably soon. So what do? We end her before she ends us, said like he was discussing dinner plans. I have people tracking her movements. When we get a location, we move. Mara stared at him. You're talking about an execution. I'm talking about survival. Lucien caught her hand. Siobhan will never stop. She can't. Her entire identity is built on family loyalty and strength. Walking away makes her look weak. She'd rather die. Then let her die somewhere far from us. It doesn't work that way. Lucien's grip tightened. As long as she's alive, you're in danger. I won't accept that. So you're going to hunt her down and kill her? Yes. The certainty in that word was terrifying. Mara pulled her hand free, standing. When does it stop, Lucien? When do we stop killing people? When you're safe. I'll never be safe. Not really. There will always be another enemy, another threat, another war. Her voice cracked. This is your life. Endless violence dressed up as protection. Lucien stood slowly, wincing. You think I don't know that? You think I wanted this for you? Then why did you save me? The question burst out raw. Why didn't you just let me die on those tracks? I'd be dead, but you'd still have your empire and your wars, and I wouldn't be standing here covered in someone else's blood arguing about murder. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus quietly excused himself. Lucien looked at Mara with something broken in his eyes. You want the truth? Always. I saved you because the second I saw you on those tracks, something woke up inside me that I thought died with my mother. His voice went rough. For 20 years I've been a weapon, a tool, a thing my father built to carry his legacy. I stopped feeling human somewhere around my 16th birthday. He moved closer. Then I jumped onto those tracks and pulled you into that alcove and felt your heart beating against mine while the train screamed past us. And for the first time in 2 decades, I remembered what it felt like to be alive. Mara's throat closed. So you're right, Lucien continued. I should have let you die. It would have been kinder, safer, smart. He cupped her face gently. But I'm selfish, and I wanted to keep feeling human, even if it meant dragging you into hell with me. Lucien, I won't apologize for saving you, but I will apologize for everything that came after. His thumb brushed across her cheek. You deserve better than this. Better than me. Mara closed her eyes, feeling tears slip free. I don't want better. I want you. Even knowing what I am, especially knowing what you are. She opened her eyes. Because you're also the man who taught me to fight back, who made me feel strong when I'd forgotten what strength looked like, who chose me over an empire. That's not strength, that's weakness. No. Mara took his hands. That's love, and it's the bravest thing you've ever done. Lucien pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. I'm going to finish this war. I'm going to make sure Siobhan can never hurt you, and then I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you. You already do. You're wrong, but I'll take it anyway. They stood together in the quiet safe house while Brooklyn hummed beyond the windows and death circled closer. Marcus's phone buzzed. He stepped back into the room, his expression grim. We have a location on Siobhan, he said. She's holed up in a penthouse in Midtown, fortified position, at least a dozen armed guards. Lucien's entire demeanor shifted. The vulnerable man disappeared. The weapon returned. How good is the intel? He asked. Diana Kozlov confirmed it personally. Siobhan's not hiding. She wants us to know where she is. It's a trap. Obviously, Marcus pulled up a schematic on his tablet. But it's also our best chance. She's contained, stationary. We can control the approach. Lucien studied the building layout. She's banking on me being too injured to move, hoping I'll wait and give her time to reinforce. Will you? No. Lucien looked at Mara. But you're staying here. Absolutely not. This isn't negotiable. Yes, it is. Mara stepped forward. You taught me to shoot, to fight, to survive. Now let me help you finish this. You'll be killed. So will you if you go in wounded and undermanned. She grabbed his arm. How many people can you field right now? Really? Lucien's jaw clenched. 15, maybe 20 if I pull everyone. Against Siobhan's dozen in a fortified position while you're bleeding from a bullet wound. Mara looked at Marcus. What are his odds? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Poor. I'm going, Mara said firmly. I'm not asking permission. You'll get yourself killed trying to protect me. Good thing you'll be too busy protecting me to die then. Lucien looked like he wanted to argue, wanted to lock her in the safe house and go wage war alone. But exhaustion and injury were wearing him down and they both knew it. If you come, he said finally, you do exactly what I tell you. No heroics, no improvising. You follow orders. Deal. And if something happens to me, you run. You don't look back. You don't try to save me. You just run and let Marcus get you somewhere safe. That's the deal. His voice went hard. Take it or stay here. Mara wanted to argue, wanted to promise she'd never abandon him, but she could see he wouldn't budge on this point. Fine, she lied. Lucien knew it was a lie. She could see it in his eyes, but he accepted it anyway because time was running out and Siobhan was waiting. They geared up methodically, bulletproof vests, weapons, spare magazines. Mara strapped on a vest that was too big and held a gun that felt too heavy and tried not to think about the last time she'd fired at a living person. Ryan's blood was still on her feet beneath fresh socks. She wondered if it would ever really wash off. Marcus coordinated with the rest of Lucien's people, soldiers converging from across the city toward a luxury building in Midtown where Siobhan Kavanaugh waited like a spider in her web. "She knows we're coming," Mara said while they loaded into an SUV. "Of course she does." Lucien checked his weapon one more time. "She's counting on it." "Then why walk into her trap?" "Because sometimes the only way through is forward." He looked at her. Last chance to stay behind. Mara buckled her seatbelt. "Drive." The SUV pulled into traffic, joining two others carrying the rest of Lucien's team. They looked like a corporate convoy heading to a late meeting. Nothing to suggest they were about to assault a fortified penthouse. Manhattan rolled past the windows. Familiar streets transformed into a battlefield Mara was still learning to navigate. "Tell me the plan," she said. Lucien pulled up the schematic on a tablet. "The building has 3 approaches: service entrance, main lobby, parking garage. Siobhan will have all 3 covered." "So how do we get in?" "We don't." He zoomed in on the roof. "The building next door is under construction. We cross from there." "That's insane." "That's why she won't expect it." Lucien looked at Marcus. "You'll lead the main assault through the lobby. Draw her people away from the penthouse level. Mara and I cross over and come in from above." "Sir, you're in no condition." "I'm in exactly the condition I need to be." Lucien's tone left no room for argument. "We move in 20 minutes. The construction site loomed ahead. 60 floors of exposed steel and concrete. The kind of place where one wrong step meant falling to a very public death. Mara's hand started shaking. Lucien took one, squeezing gently. "I won't let you fall." "You can't promise that." "Watch me." The SUVs parked 2 blocks away. They walked the final distance on foot, splitting into teams. Marcus and his people headed toward the main building. Lucien and Mara entered the construction site through a gap in the chain-link fence. Inside smelled like concrete dust and welding fumes. The elevator shafts were empty pits dropping into darkness. The only way up was stairs, 60 flights of them. Lucien started climbing. His breathing was labored by the 10th floor, painful by the 20th. By 30, he was leaving blood on the handrail. "Stop," Mara said. "You need to rest." "No time." "You're bleeding through your bandages." "I know." He kept climbing. "Just keep moving." They reached the 60th floor with Lucien barely able to stand. The gap between buildings was maybe 15 feet across. A construction bridge spanned it, 2 steel I-beams with plywood laid across them. No railings, nothing to catch them if they fell. Wind howled through the gap, strong enough to make the plywood flex. "We're really doing this," Mara said. "Last chance to back out." She looked at the drop, at the plywood, at Lucien bleeding and exhausted and still moving forward. "Let's go." Lucien went first, moving with agonizing slowness. Each step was measured, deliberate. Mara followed, trying not to look down at the 60-story drop that would turn her into street art. Halfway across, the plywood shifted. Mara froze, her heart slamming against her ribs. "Don't stop," Lucien called back. "Keep your weight moving forward." She forced her legs to move. One step. Another. The city spread out below them like a living map, millions of people going about their lives while 2 idiots crossed a construction bridge to commit what amounted to a home invasion. They reached the other side. Lucien immediately collapsed against a support beam, breathing hard. Mara knelt beside him. "How bad?" "Bad enough." He pulled out his phone with shaking hands. "But we're in position." He texted Marcus, "Go." 30 seconds later, gunfire erupted from the building's lobby. The assault had begun. Lucien forced himself upright. "Penthouse is 4 floors down. Service stairs." They moved through the building's skeleton, half-finished floors where walls hadn't been built yet, through a maintenance door, down concrete stairs that echoed with their footsteps. At the 56th floor, they stopped. Beyond the door was the penthouse level. Beyond the door was Siobhan Kavanaugh and whatever hell she'd prepared. Lucien checked his weapon. "We go in fast, clear each room, find Siobhan, end this." "And if it goes wrong?" He looked at her. "Then I love you, and I'm sorry I dragged you into my war." Before Mara could respond, he kicked the door open. The penthouse was a fortress. Furniture had been overturned for cover. Windows were barricaded, and at least 8 armed men turned toward them as they entered. Lucien fired first. The fight was brutal and close. Lucien moved like a weapon despite his injuries, dropping targets with clinical precision. Mara followed his lead, firing when she had clear shots, taking cover when she didn't. A guard appeared from a side room. Mara shot him twice. He went down. She felt nothing. That terrified her almost as much as the bullets flying past her head. They fought through 3 rooms before finding Siobhan. She stood in what used to be a luxury living room, flanked by 2 bodyguards, perfectly composed despite the chaos, a gun in one hand and a smile on her face. "Lucien Moretti," she said. "You look terrible." "Siobhan Kavanaugh." Lucien's weapon never wavered. "You look like someone about to die." "Do I?" Her smile widened. "Because from where I'm standing, you're bleeding out and outnumbered." "I count 3 of you, 2 of us." "That's not outnumbered." "You're not counting the 6 men about to come through that door behind you." Lucien didn't turn around. "Marcus already dealt with your reinforcements. It's just us now." Siobhan's composure cracked slightly. "Then I suppose we do this the old-fashioned way." She raised her weapon. Everything happened at once. Siobhan fired at Lucien. Lucien dove left, returning fire. Both bodyguards opened up. Mara shot the one on the right, catching him in the shoulder. The second one turned toward her. Lucien put 2 rounds in his chest. Then it was just Siobhan, backing toward the windows with her gun still raised. "You killed my father," she said. "He was reaching for a weapon. He was trying to negotiate peace," her voice cracked. "You murdered him in cold blood. I did what was necessary to protect what's mine." Lucien advanced slowly. "Lower your weapon, Siobhan. This doesn't have to end with you dead." "Yes, it does." She laughed, broken, bitter. "Because if I surrender, I'm weak. If I run, I'm a coward. The only way I leave this room with any dignity is in a body bag." "That's pride talking. That's reality." Siobhan's finger tightened on the trigger. "You should understand. You built your empire on the same principle." Lucien stopped moving. "I did. And it cost me everything that mattered." "Until her." Siobhan's eyes flicked to Mara. "The nurse who made you human again." "Yes." "Then you understand why I can't let this go." Siobhan's expression hardened. "She's your weakness, and I'm going to—" She swung her weapon toward Mara. Lucien fired. The bullet caught Siobhan in the chest, spinning her backward into the window. For a moment she just stood there, surprise replacing rage on her face. Then she fell. Not out the window, just down, collapsing onto expensive carpet while blood spread beneath her. Lucien crossed to her, kicking the weapon away. Siobhan looked up at him with eyes already going distant. "Tell me something," she whispered. "Was it worth it? Burning everything for her?" Lucien looked back at Mara. "Every second." Siobhan smiled. "Then you're even more doomed than I thought." Her eyes went empty. Silence filled the penthouse. Mara stood frozen, her weapon still raised, while her mind tried to process what had just happened. Siobhan Kavanaugh was dead. The war was over. And they were still standing. Lucien swayed, catching himself against a wall. Mara was beside him instantly. "You're bleeding again." "I know." He leaned on her heavily. "We need to move. Police will be here soon." They staggered toward the service exit where Marcus waited with the rest of the team. Bodies littered the penthouse. Kavanaugh soldiers who'd chosen loyalty over survival. The cost of war written in blood and brass casings. Outside, sirens wailed. Marcus got them to an SUV and they disappeared into Manhattan traffic, while the first police cars arrived at the luxury building in Midtown where a small war had just concluded. In the back seat, Lucien finally let himself collapse. Mara held pressure on his wound while the driver raced toward a private clinic that asked no questions. "Stay with me," she said. Lucien's hand found hers. "Not planning on leaving." "Good. Because I just watched you kill someone to protect me, and if you die now, I'm going to be very angry." He smiled weakly. "Can't have that." "No, you can't." Mara's voice cracked. "I love you, Lucien Moretti. So you don't get to die. That's an order." "Yes, ma'am." His eyes started to close. Mara shook him. "No, stay awake. Talk to me." "About what?" "Anything. Everything. Tell me about after." "After?" "After tonight. After the war. What happens next?" Lucian's breathing was shallow, but his eyes focused on her face. Next, we disappear for a while. Let things settle. Then we figure out how to build a life that doesn't involve quite so much bloodshed. You think that's possible? I think with you, anything is possible. The SUV screeched to a stop outside an unmarked building in Queens. Doctors appeared immediately, the kind who'd clearly treated gunshot wounds before and knew better than to ask questions. They took Lucien inside. Mara tried to follow, but someone caught her arm. Marcus. Let them work. I need to be with him. You need to let them save his life. His grip was firm but gentle. Come on. We'll wait together. The waiting room was sterile and impersonal. Mara sat in a plastic chair while doctors worked on Lucien in the next room. Time became meaningless. Minutes or hours, she couldn't tell. Marcus brought coffee she didn't drink. Diana Kozlov arrived at some point, speaking in low tones with Marcus about cleanup and police reports and covering their tracks. Angela Reeves called to confirm that the last of the Kavanaugh organization was surrendering to federal custody. The war was over. They'd won. So why did Mara feel like she'd lost something fundamental? A doctor emerged. Young, exhausted, covered in blood that had to be Lucian's. He's stable, she said. The bullet missed major organs, but he lost a lot of blood. He'll need weeks to recover. Can I see him? 5 minutes. Then he needs rest. Mara didn't remember crossing the room. Suddenly she was just there, standing beside a bed where Lucien lay hooked to monitors and IV lines. His eyes opened when she took his hand. Hey, he whispered. Hey yourself? Mara brushed hair off his forehead. You scared me. Sorry. Don't apologize. Just don't do it again. Lucian's fingers tightened around hers. It's over. Siobhan's dead. The Kavanaughs are finished. You're safe. We're safe, Mara corrected. We're safe, he agreed. She leaned down, kissing him gently. When you're healed, we're talking about what comes next. Already know what comes next. What? Lucian's eyes were serious despite the pain medication. I'm going to marry you, build you a life where you never have to be afraid again, and spend every day proving I deserve the chance you gave me. Mara's throat closed. That's a lot of promises. I'm good at keeping promises, even the impossible ones, especially those. The doctor appeared in the doorway. Time's up. He needs to rest. Mara squeezed Lucian's hand one more time. I'll be right outside. I know. She left him to sleep and healing, stepping back into the waiting room where Marcus and Diana waited with updates about the aftermath. The Kavanaugh organization was imploding. Ethan had accepted a plea deal that would see him serve 8 years in federal prison. Angela Reeves was being hailed as the prosecutor who'd finally broken Irish organized crime in New York. And somewhere in the chaos, 2 people who'd met on subway tracks had survived a war that should have killed them both. Mara sat in the plastic chair and finally let herself cry. Not from fear or pain or trauma, from relief. Because for the first time since Ethan had pushed her onto those tracks, she could breathe without looking over her shoulder, could imagine a future that extended past the next threat, could believe that maybe, just maybe, she and Lucien had earned the chance to be happy. Outside, dawn was breaking over New York. A new day. A new beginning. And despite everything, the violence, the blood, the impossible choices, Mara Vale smiled because she was alive. Lucien was alive, and they had survived, together. Lucien spent 3 weeks recovering in a private facility that looked like a spa, but functioned like a military hospital. Mara visited every day, watching him transform from the bleeding man she'd held in the SUV back into something resembling human. The doctor said he was lucky. The bullet had missed his liver by centimeters. Another inch, and he would have bled out before reaching the clinic. Lucky. Mara wasn't sure she believed in luck anymore, not after everything they'd survived. She sat beside his bed on a Tuesday morning while autumn rain hammered against bulletproof windows and read him updates from the outside world. The Kavanaugh organization had completely dissolved. Federal prosecutors were still processing arrests, 43 people charged with everything from money laundering to murder. Ethan Cross had been transferred to a federal facility upstate, where he'd spend the next 8 years contemplating the choices that had led him there. Angela called yesterday, Mara said, setting her phone aside. She wants us to testify at the trial. Lucien didn't open his eyes. What did you tell her? That I'd think about it. You should say no. Why? Because testifying means reliving everything in front of cameras and juries and defense attorneys who'll tear you apart to save their clients. Lucian's voice was tired. You've been through enough. Mara looked at him, still pale beneath his tan, still moving carefully because of the healing wound. What about you? Will you testify? If I have to. He opened his eyes finally. But I'd prefer to stay as far from federal courtrooms as possible. Because you have your own crimes to hide. Yes. No apology, no justification, just honesty. They'd been having versions of this conversation for weeks, dancing around the fundamental question of what happened next. Lucien's empire still existed, diminished by the war with the Kavanaughs, but intact. Men still answered his calls. Money still flowed through channels that would make prosecutors salivate. He was still a criminal, and Mara was still in love with him. Those two facts existed in constant tension. I've been thinking, she said carefully. That's usually dangerous. I want to go back to work. Lucien sat up slowly, wincing. At the hospital? Yes. You realize people will ask questions. Where you've been? What happened? I'll tell them I needed time after a personal crisis, which is true. Mara met his eyes. I can't hide forever, Lucien. I'm a nurse. It's who I am. It's who you were. His voice was gentle but firm. You're different now. I know. She looked at her hands, the scar on her thumb from relocating the joint, calluses from hours at the shooting range. But that doesn't mean I stop helping people. Lucien was quiet for a long moment. If you go back, you can't live with me. Not openly. The association puts you at risk. From who? The Kavanaughs are gone. There are always more enemies. He reached for her hand. I have competitors, rivals, people who'd love to exploit any weakness they can find. And you, Maravale, are my greatest weakness. The words should have been romantic. Instead, they sounded like a prison sentence. So what are you suggesting? Mara asked. We pretend we don't know each other? I'm suggesting we're careful. You get your own apartment, your own life. We see each other when it's safe. That's not a relationship. That's an affair. That's survival. Lucien's grip tightened. I won't watch you die because someone wanted to hurt me. You can't protect me from everything. I can try. Mara pulled her hand free, standing. This is exactly what I was afraid of. What? That saving me would become your entire identity. That you'd spend the rest of your life trying to keep me locked away safe while you fight wars alone. She moved to the window, watching rain streak down glass. I didn't survive Ethan just to become another kind of prisoner. That's not what I'm doing. Isn't it? She turned back to face him. You're already planning how to hide me, how to keep me separate from your life, how to maintain distance for my protection. Because it's necessary. No. Mara's voice was firm. It's fear. You're afraid that loving me openly makes you vulnerable. And maybe it does. But I didn't fight through hell to be with you in secret. Lucien looked at her with something broken in his expression. Then what do you want? I want you to choose. Really choose. Mara crossed back to the bed. Either you're all in, we build a life together despite the danger, or you let me go. But this halfway thing where we pretend we can have both safety and love, that doesn't work. You're asking me to risk your life. I'm asking you to trust that I'm strong enough to handle it. She took his face in her hands. You taught me to fight, Lucien, to shoot, to survive. Now trust that those lessons took. His eyes searched her face. If something happens to you, then we deal with it together. Mara kissed him softly. But I'm not living in fear anymore. Not of Ethan, not of the Kavanaughs, not even of your enemies. You should be afraid. Probably. She smiled. But I'm choosing you anyway. Lucien pulled her into his arms despite the pain it cost him. You're either the bravest or stupidest person I've ever met. Can I be both? Apparently. They held each other while rain continued falling and the world outside kept turning. Somewhere in Manhattan, life was continuing without them. People going to work. Trains running underground. The city that had tried to kill Mara rebuilding itself after yet another war. I need to tell you something, Lucien said against her hair. What? I'm getting out. Mara pulled back to look at him. Out of what? The business. All of it. He said it with absolute certainty. I've been thinking about this since the warehouse, since I almost died and realized the only thing that mattered was getting back to you. Lucien, you can't just walk away from an empire. Watch me. His expression was determined. I have people who can take over operations, loyal people who've been waiting for a chance to lead. I'll maintain some oversight, enough to ensure stability. But the day-to-day violence? The wars? I'm done. Mara's heart hammered. What will you do? Whatever you need me to do. He cupped her face. You want to go back to nursing? I'll support that. You want to leave New York entirely? We'll leave. You want to build something new? We'll build it together. You'd give up everything for me. I already did. Lucien's smile was sad. The second I jumped onto those subway tracks, I chose you over everything. This is just making it official. Tears burned Mara's eyes. What if you regret it? I won't. You don't know that. Yes, I do. He kissed her forehead. Because for the first time in my life, I'm choosing something I actually want instead of something I inherited. That's not regret. That's freedom. Not. Leaving the criminal underworld turned out to be almost as violent as staying in it. Lucien spent the next month in constant meetings with lieutenants and associates, dividing his empire into manageable pieces. Some people accepted the transition gracefully. Others required persuasion that occasionally involved Marcus and several heavily armed men. But slowly, methodically, Lucien Moretti extracted himself from the machinery he'd been born into. He kept enough connections to remain protected, enough resources to stay dangerous if necessary. But the daily operations, the smuggling, the enforcement, the wars, passed to others. Mara watched the transformation from the apartment she'd rented in the East Village. Small, modest, nothing like Lucien's penthouse. But it was hers, paid for with her own money, a space where she could rebuild herself on her own terms. She'd returned to St. Catherine's Hospital on a part-time schedule. The staff had welcomed her back with questions she deflected and sympathy she didn't quite deserve. Dr. Patel had pulled her aside on the first day. You look different, she'd said. I feel different. Good different or bad different? Mara had considered the question honestly. Both. Work helped. The familiar rhythm of trauma care grounded her in ways nothing else could. She was good at her job. Saving lives came naturally even when taking them had become just as easy. That contradiction lived in her constantly now. The nurse who healed, the woman who'd shot a man without hesitation, both versions existing in the same body. Lucien visited her apartment most nights. They cooked together, talked about mundane things, pretended they were normal people building a normal relationship. Sometimes it almost felt real. Other nights, Lucien would wake from nightmares screaming, or Mara would see someone who looked like Ethan and freeze completely. The war had marked them both in ways that would never fully heal, but they were trying. 3 months after Siobhan Kavanaugh died, Angela Reeves called with news. Ethan's asking for a meeting, she said. With you, specifically. Mara's blood went cold. Why? He claims he wants to apologize, make amends as part of his rehabilitation program. Angela's skepticism was evident. You don't have to agree. I can shut this down immediately. Mara looked at Lucien across her tiny kitchen. He was reading something on his tablet, his expression neutral, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. What do you think? She asked him. Lucien set the tablet down. I think Ethan Cross is a manipulative sociopath who doesn't deserve another second of your time. That's not what I asked, he sighed. I think you need closure, real closure, not the kind that comes from watching someone get dragged away in handcuffs. Mara turned back to the phone. Set it up. Are you sure? No, but do it anyway. The federal facility was 2 hours north of the city. Mara made the drive alone despite Lucien's protests. This was something she needed to do without him standing guard. Security processed her through multiple checkpoints before leading her to a visiting room that smelled like industrial cleaner and desperation. Ethan was already seated at a metal table, wearing orange scrubs and looking smaller than she remembered. Prison had changed him, or revealed who he'd always been beneath the polish. He looked up when she entered, his expression carefully neutral. Thank you for coming. Mara sat across from him, maintaining distance. I almost didn't. I wouldn't have blamed you. Ethan's hands were folded on the table, No restraints. Apparently, he'd earned minimum security privileges. How are you? That's really your opening? I don't know what else to say. He looked down. I practiced this conversation 100 times. Nothing sounds right, because there's nothing you can say that makes any of this okay. I know. Ethan met her eyes. I'm not here to make excuses. I'm here to tell you I'm sorry. For which part? Mara's voice was flat. Stalking me? Pushing me onto subway tracks? Working with criminals who tried to torture me? Be specific. Ethan flinched. All of it. Every moment from the first time I raised my hand to you until federal agents put me in handcuffs. I'm sorry for all of it. Why now? Why after everything? Because my therapist says I can't heal until I acknowledge the harm I caused. He said it like reciting a lesson. And because you deserve to know I understand what I did to you. Mara studied his face, looking for deception, for manipulation, for the man who'd controlled her for 2 years. But all she saw was someone broken trying to pretend he was healing. Do you understand? She asked quietly. Really? I think so. Ethan's voice wavered. I was angry. At myself. At my life. At everything. And I took it out on you because you were there and you cared about me and I could. That's not understanding. That's justification. Then tell me what I'm missing. Mara leaned forward. You didn't just hurt me, Ethan. You dismantled me, piece by piece. You isolated me from everyone who loved me, made me doubt my own sanity, convinced me that your violence was somehow my fault. Her voice stayed steady despite the emotions churning beneath. You turned me into someone who flinched at raised voices and apologized for breathing too loud. Someone who checked your mood before speaking. Someone who stopped existing as a person and became a thing you owned. Ethan was crying now, silent tears running down his face. And the worst part? Mara continued. I let you. I stayed. I made excuses. I convinced myself you'd change if I just loved you enough. So yeah, you hurt me, but I hurt myself too by refusing to see what you really were. I'm sorry, Ethan whispered. I know. Mara stood. But your apology doesn't fix anything. It doesn't give me back the 2 years you stole. It doesn't erase the scars. And it definitely doesn't mean I forgive you. Then why did you come? She paused at the door. Because I needed to see you powerless, behind bars, reduced to begging for forgiveness from someone you tried to kill. Mara looked at him one last time. I came here to remind myself that I survived you, that I'm stronger than everything you did to me, and that you're exactly where you deserve to be. She left without looking back. The drive home was quiet. Mara stopped halfway to cry in a gas station parking lot, not from sadness, but from release. Seeing Ethan small and defeated had closed a door she didn't realize was still open. He couldn't hurt her anymore. Not really. She'd survived him, survived worse than him. And whatever came next, she'd face it standing upright instead of cowering. Lucian was waiting when she got back to the city. Not at her apartment, she'd asked him to give her space, but at his penthouse. She went to him anyway because some nights she needed the fortress more than the freedom. How did it go? He asked when she walked in. He apologized. Did it help? Yes and no. Mara collapsed onto his couch. Seeing him broken was satisfying, but it doesn't change what happened. Lucien sat beside her. Nothing will. The past is fixed. We only get to choose what we do with the future. When did you get philosophical? I've always been philosophical. You just weren't listening. He pulled her close. What do you want to do with the future, Mara Vale? She thought about it. Really thought about it. I want to keep working. Keep helping people. She looked up at him. But I also want to build something new. Something that helps people like me who are trying to escape dangerous situations. Like a shelter? More than that. A network. Safe houses. Legal support. Job training. Everything someone needs to actually get free. Her voice grew stronger as the idea took shape. I've been saving money. And I know you have resources you're not using anymore. Lucien was quiet for a moment. You want to turn my criminal empire into a charity? I want to turn your resources into something that actually helps instead of hurts. That's ambitious. Is that a no? That's a yes. He kissed her temple. Let's build something worth surviving for. The Mara Vale Foundation launched 6 months later in a renovated brownstone in Brooklyn. The official mission was supporting domestic violence survivors. The unofficial mission was providing everything the system failed to deliver: real protection, real resources, real chances at new lives. Lucien provided the funding through carefully laundered, legitimate businesses. Mara provided the vision and operational expertise. Together, they built something that actually worked. The first year, they helped 37 people escape dangerous situations. The second year, that number tripled. By year 3, they had satellite offices in 5 cities and a waiting list of people desperate for help. Mara split her time between the foundation and the hospital, finding balance between saving individual lives and building systems that prevented the damage in the first place. It was exhausting, fulfilling, everything she'd needed without knowing it. Lucien transformed too. The man who'd ruled through violence became someone who solved problems with phone calls and checkbooks. He still had dangerous edges that never fully disappeared, but he channeled them into protecting the people Mara's foundation served instead of building criminal empires. They bought a house in Brooklyn, nothing ostentatious, just a brownstone with good light and enough space for both of them to breathe. Mara planted flowers in the tiny backyard. Lucien installed security that would make Fort Knox jealous. Some habits died hard. Marcus still checked in weekly. Diana Kozlov still handled their financial arrangements with cheerful amorality. Angela Reeves occasionally called with updates about prosecutions and convictions. The old world never fully released them, but they built a new one anyway. 2 years after Siobhan Kavanaugh died, Lucien proposed. They were walking through Central Park on a Sunday morning when he stopped at the bridge over the lake and pulled out a ring. Simple platinum band with a single diamond. Nothing flashy. Everything perfect. "I know I'm not what you planned for," he said. "I know I come with complications and dangers and a past that would terrify most people." "Is there a question coming?" Mara asked, smiling. "Marry me anyway." Lucien took her hand. "Build a life with me that's bigger than survival. Choose me knowing exactly who I am and what I've done." Mara looked at the ring, at the man holding it, at the life they'd built from the wreckage of violence. "You forgot something," she said. "What?" "You're also brave and loyal, and you jumped onto subway tracks to save a stranger without hesitation. You declared war on an entire criminal organization to protect me. You gave up everything you knew to build something better." She took the ring from him. "So, yes, you come with complications, but so do I. We're both broken people who found each other in the dark. And that's exactly why this works." Mara slipped the ring onto her own finger. "Yeta, yes, sit," she said. "I'll marry you. I'll choose you. Every single day." Lucien kissed her while joggers passed and tourists took photos, and the city that had tried to kill them both continued spinning indifferently. They got married 3 months later in a small ceremony at City Hall with Marcus and Diana as witnesses. No big reception, no expensive venue. Just 2 people making promises they intended to keep. Angela Reeves sent flowers with a card that read, "Congratulations on the most improbable love story I've ever witnessed." Dr. Patel sent champagne. Even Ryan's family, the undercover agent who'd died trying to help Mara escape, sent a note saying they were glad something good had come from the tragedy. The world kept turning. The foundation kept growing. And Mara and Lucien built a life that looked nothing like either of them had imagined but fit perfectly anyway. 5 years after Ethan pushed her onto those subway tracks, Mara stood in the Foundation's main office reviewing case files. A young woman had just arrived, 23, terrified, running from a boyfriend who'd escalated from psychological abuse to physical violence. Mara recognized the look in her eyes, the shame, the fear, the desperate hope that someone would actually help this time. "You're safe here," Mara told her. "I promise." The woman nodded, not quite believing. Mara understood that too. Trust took time to rebuild. Safety had to be proven, not promised. "I'm going to connect you with our legal team," Mara continued. "They'll help you file the necessary paperwork, and we have an apartment ready where you can stay while we develop a long-term plan." "Just like that?" The woman's voice was small. "You just help?" "Just like that." Why? Mara thought about subway tracks and exploding warehouses, and a man who jumped into darkness to save her. Because someone helped me once, and I'm paying it forward. After the woman was settled with the intake team, Mara stepped outside for air. Brooklyn stretched around her, brownstones and coffee shops, and normal people living normal lives. She'd become one of them somehow. The trauma nurse who'd survived hell and built something from the ashes. Her phone buzzed. Lucien, dinner at home? I'm cooking. Mara, what are we having? Lucien, your favorite. And before you ask, yes, I remembered the wine. She smiled, typing back. Mara, see you at 7. The subway ride home was routine now. She no longer flinched at platform edges or checked obsessively for Ethan in crowds. The fear had faded into something manageable, present but not paralyzing. At the 42nd Street station, the same platform where everything had changed, Mara paused. A young couple stood arguing near the tracks. The man's body language was aggressive. The woman looked trapped. Mara almost kept walking. This wasn't her problem. She'd done her time fighting other people's battles. But then the woman's eyes met hers, desperate, pleading, and Mara remembered what it felt like to be that desperate. She crossed the platform casually, positioning herself between the couple and the tracks. Excuse me, she said to the woman, don't you work at St. Catherine's? I'm sure I've seen you in the ER. The woman caught on immediately. Oh, yes, I think so. I'm heading there now for a shift. Want to share a cab? The man started to protest, but Mara fixed him with a look she'd learned from Lucien. Calm, absolute, promising violence if necessary. He backed down. Mara guided the woman toward the exit, chatting about fake hospital shifts until they were safely on the street. Then she handed over a business card for the foundation. If you need help, Mara said quietly, call that number. They'll get you safe. The woman's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just get safe. Mara watched her disappear into the crowd, then continued home. Lucien was in the kitchen when she arrived, cooking pasta with the focused intensity he brought to everything. The house smelled like garlic and wine and home. You're late, he said without looking up. Stopped to save someone. Of course you did. He glanced over, smiling. Was it successful? I think so. Mara wrapped her arms around him from behind. She took the card at least. That's all you can do. Give them the tools. They have to choose to use them. When did you get wise? I've always been wise. You just married me for my looks. Mara laughed, kissing his neck. Absolutely. The criminal empire and murder skills had nothing to do with it. I knew it. They ate dinner on the back patio while summer faded into autumn and the city hummed beyond their small yard. Marcus called halfway through to report that one of their safe houses had successfully relocated a family being hunted by a violent ex-husband. Diana emailed financial reports showing the foundation was exceeding its fundraising goals. The work continued. The world kept needing saving, and Mara and Lucien kept answering. Later, lying in bed with Lucien's arms around her and moonlight streaming through windows, Mara thought about trajectories. 5 years ago, she'd been running for her life through a subway station. 4 years ago, she'd been chained in a freezer waiting to be mutilated. 3 years ago, she'd watched a woman die and wondered if she was becoming a monster. Now she was married to a reformed crime boss, running a foundation that actually helped people, and building a life that felt earned rather than given. What are you thinking about? Lucien murmured against her hair. How far we've come. Regretting it? Not even a little. She turned to face him. You? Lucien traced her features in the darkness. I spent 20 years being my father's weapon. Then I spent 3 weeks bleeding in a hospital bed, realizing I'd wasted all that time on violence that meant nothing. He kissed her softly. Then I came home to you. And for the first time in my life, I understood what I was supposed to be fighting for all along. Which is? This, us, the chance to build something that actually matters. Mara's throat tightened. I love you. I know. You married me despite excellent reasons not to. Lucien smiled in the darkness. Best decision you ever made. Second best. What's first? Getting back up after Ethan pushed me down. Fair point. He pulled her closer. Though I'm biased toward the decision that led to me. They fell asleep tangled together while the city breathed beyond their walls, and tomorrow waited with all its complications and possibilities. Somewhere in federal prison, Ethan Cross was probably sleeping too, dreaming whatever dreams sociopaths dreamed. Somewhere in the afterlife, if such things existed, Siobhan and Connor Kavanaugh and all the others killed in their war were learning whether violence earned redemption or damnation. But Mara didn't think about them anymore. She thought about the woman she'd helped that afternoon, about the 37 people the Foundation would help this month, about the life she'd built from nothing but determination and the love of a man who jumped onto subway tracks for a stranger. The past was fixed, unchangeable, written in scars and trauma that would never fully fade. But the future? The future was theirs to write. And Mara Vale, trauma nurse, survivor, wife of a reformed criminal, builder of second chances, intended to make it beautiful, one saved life at a time, one day at a time, one choice at a time, choosing love over fear, hope over despair, forward over back, always forward, into whatever came next, together.